And then powder is third, which is interesting because in recent surveys that we've done last year, so in 2023, normally we saw gummy actually in front of powder, but now we're starting to see that shift of powder is actually going to be in front of gummy.
Do we know if organic matters to these consumers across categories and specifically outside of food and beverage?
Yeah, so within supplements also, it was still significantly higher than any other certification. So we did non-GMO as well, gluten-free, GMP certified, NSF certified for those supplement-specific products, and organic was still just by far much higher.
Expo West 2025 is bringing new and exciting events to Anaheim this year. Check out these top 5 new things you don't want to miss out on. Kick off your Expo West experience at the Expo West Block Party. Join us for live music, amazing food, and a chance to connect with new faces and friends. Buyers, we're extending our buyers-only hours to give you an exclusive early peek at the show floor. Recharge and fuel up at the Newtopia Now Thrive Cafe pop-up in the New Hope Network Cafe. We're introducing 2 brand new pavilions for you to explore. Check out the Conscious Beauty Pavilion in Hall C and the Wellness Beverage Pavilion in Hall D. Join us at Community Brunch on Thursday morning, a free brunch open to all attendees and exhibitors. Head over to expowest.com for the full agenda. See you there.
What, the where, and the why of the dietary supplements industry, especially from a data perspective. That's what we do. What's selling from ingredient categories and individual ingredients. Where is it selling? That's our channel data. And why is it selling? Meaning, what conditions are motivating that purchase for consumers?
As you can see, right, this is about a $77.4 billion industry.
in 2024 is what we're estimating it to be, and it's going to be adding about 33 billion between 2023 and 2027. So quite a significant amount.
Looking at the weight management category, I think that some of the promising ingredients would be what I would say is the fiber and prebiotic piece, just kind of addressing, the gut health side of weight management in some of these different, products. But Rick, do you have any thoughts on ingredients?
Well, I think there's a different kind of attention being paid to this than was paid in the past. Before we had some, thermogenic stuff and some appetite suppressants that, of questionable efficacy. But I think, as I said before, the conversation moving it over to blood sugar was a big shift. And that is a place where there's, we have some science.
And then I'll end here with the last consumer piece, just showing, which formats that respondents are currently taking their dietary supplement products in. So tablet and capsule are going to be those top two formats. And then powder is third, which is interesting because in recent surveys that we've done last year, so in 2023, normally we saw gummy actually in front of powder, but now we're starting to see that shift of powder is actually going to be in front of gummy.
Do we know if organic matters to these consumers across categories and specifically outside of food and beverage?
Yeah, so within supplements also, it was still significantly higher than any other certification. So we did non-GMO as well, gluten-free, GMP certified, NSF certified for those supplement-specific products, and organic was still just by far much higher.
Expo West 2025 is bringing new and exciting events to Anaheim this year. Check out these top 5 new things you don't want to miss out on. Kick off your Expo West experience at the Expo West Block Party. Join us for live music, amazing food, and a chance to connect with new faces and friends. Buyers, we're extending our buyers-only hours to give you an exclusive early peek at the show floor. Recharge and fuel up at the Newtopia Now Thrive Cafe pop-up in the New Hope Network Cafe. We're introducing 2 brand new pavilions for you to explore. Check out the Conscious Beauty Pavilion in Hall C and the Wellness Beverage Pavilion in Hall D. Join us at Community Brunch on Thursday morning, a free brunch open to all attendees and exhibitors. Head over to expowest.com for the full agenda. See you there.
What, the where, and the why of the dietary supplements industry, especially from a data perspective. That's what we do. What's selling from ingredient categories and individual ingredients. Where is it selling? That's our channel data. And why is it selling? Meaning, what conditions are motivating that purchase for consumers?
As you can see, right, this is about a $77.4 billion industry. In 2024 is what we're estimating it to be, and it's going to be adding about 33 billion between 2023 and 2027. So quite a significant amount.
Looking at the weight management category, I think that some of the promising ingredients would be what I would say is the fiber and prebiotic piece, just kind of addressing, the gut health side of weight management. In some of these different, products. But Rick, do you have any thoughts on ingredients?
Well, I think there's a different kind of attention being paid to this than was paid in the past. Before we had some, thermogenic stuff and some appetite suppressants that, of questionable efficacy. But I think, as I said before, the conversation moving it over to blood sugar was a big shift. And that is a place where there's, we have some science.
And then I'll end here with the last consumer piece, just showing, which formats that respondents are currently taking their dietary supplement products in. So tablet and capsule are going to be those top 2 formats. And then powder is third, which is interesting because in recent surveys that we've done last year, so in 2023, normally we saw gummy actually in front of powder, but now we're starting to see that shift of powder is actually going to be in front of gummy.
Do we know if organic matters to these consumers across categories and specifically outside of food and beverage?
Yeah, so within supplements also, it was still significantly higher than any other certification. So we did non-GMO as well, gluten-free, GMP certified, NSF certified, for those supplement-specific products, and organic was still just by far much higher.
Did they know?
Let's make sure.
Welcome.
My mic is off.
Good morning. Welcome to Expo West 2025. Woo! It's starting. I think I was figuring it out. This is 20 for me. Anybody else 20? Probably all my friends. Yeah, 20? Good. 10? 10 expos? At least 10? Awesome. It's been a long time. All right, let's dive in. Welcome. We're here to talk about purpose today. And I want to start with the most significant event in my life. So when I was 6 years old, my father found out that the cancer he had been battling for many years was terminal. and he only had a couple of years left to live. So here's this 6-year-old boy, 27-year-old dad. He decided right then and there that he would pour his life experience into his only son. He had, in his mind, he had a couple of years to do this, and so he took that
Yeah, we can see.
charge personally and attacked it with purpose.
What do you think?
So for me, at 6, of course, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the lessons that my dad taught me during that period and then ongoing throughout my life were extremely impactful for me. So he taught me many, many lessons, but 3 themes really stood out. Number 1, son, if you're going to do it, make sure you do it right. Take the time, slow down, and do it right. Number 2, be bold in everything you do. My dad would go to my soccer games and woo, woo, woo. He didn't care. He was the one cheering and the loudest, and he just didn't care. He was bold. And the last one was make a difference. Find a way to make a difference. All this from my 27-year-old dad, right? I remember being knee-deep in the Triumph Spitfire that my dad loved. Grease up to the elbows, working on the car, him showing me how to do the oil change. Slow down. We're going to do this right.
It's not a sponsor of Climate Day.
Do it right. I'm a drummer. Any other drummers? Yeah? Even a drum circle, right? So I'm a little older than most of you in here probably, but there's a guy named Peter Criss from a band called Kiss. He was my idol as a very young kid. And so when I was putting on the cat makeup for Halloween, he was right there with me, making sure I did it right? Like, and I'm going to be bold. He was like, lean in and do it, be bold, right? And I remember at a very young age, he asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I'm going to be a garbage man. Why do you want to be a garbage man? Well, they get to hang off the back of trucks and wear gloves all day. What's better than that, right? And my dad would always say, hey, son, you want to be a garbage man, just make sure you're making a difference in that community. Like, understand why you're doing it. Make a difference. He was full of these things, and it was amazing for me to grow up with him, and I honor him every day in everything that I try to do. So why am I telling you this story? I believe to my core that the significant events that we have as human beings on this earth, whether they're full of joy and celebration, or whether they're really painful and you don't have a clue why it happened to you, these significant events make up who we are, and they set us on our purpose. I believe that to my core, and I want you just to come on this journey with me and try to believe it for yourself as well, okay? So see if you can tap into one of those significant events right now. Maybe it's the one you don't want to think about, or maybe it's the one that brings you the most joy. But I firmly believe that significant events are one way to start to drive towards purpose. And my goal today is to take you on a journey where you can articulate your purpose, and not only articulate it, but feel the power of it, and harness that power, and do something big in the world. The biggest thing you can do is to be fulfilled, especially at work, okay? So you ready to go on this journey with me? All right, let's do it. So this is my definition of a purpose. A purpose is a clear and compelling reason for being that drives you to make a meaningful impact in the world, aligning your values, passions, and actions toward a significant goal. It is your why. It is not what you do. It is not how you do it. It's not even your title. It's the why you do it. How many times have you been asked, why do you exist? Probably not very many, okay? It's a scary question, right? Like, how do you dive into that question? That is a scary question for some folks. Why do you even exist? Why? The point I want to make about this definition, though, is that it's about you making a meaningful difference. It's about your impact on the world. It's about your why. Okay? We meet lots of folks who are on purpose, lots of founders. I work with founders every day in my job, in my day job. Founders in particular, entrepreneurs, founders, these folks are on purpose. Get out of my way, I'm going to get something done, right? We meet these folks. You probably work for one. If you're in this industry, you probably work for that founder. But I'm here to ask you, why not you? How do you connect in with your own purpose and make a meaningful difference each and every day, a difference that'll bring fulfillment and impact into your own life? All right? So I'm going to ask you this question many, many times today over the next hour that we're together. How clear are you on your personal purpose? If you would have to answer the question, I exist to blank, could you answer the question? Yeah, some of you are nodding. It takes some work, right? I'm also here to convince you that purpose is energy and it is fuel. When you plug into it, it's like an electric light socket, full of energy. And by the end of this hour, I'm hoping that you're able to articulate your purpose, even a little bit, version 1.0. It's kind of an iterative process. And you can plug into the energy that comes in with purpose, comes to you with purpose. We're going to interview some folks. We're going to dive deep into this today, all right? So just so I know what we're working with, how many of you, raise your hand high, already know your purpose and you're on it and you're living it every day and you could articulate it?
Do I recall?
Sweet.
You're going to cue me when to
It's
go?
going to be an easy one, all right? How many of you might still be trying to figure it out? You're kind of on a journey around it? Awesome. And how many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? All right, good. I can tell you this is the most purpose-driven industry I know of on the planet. So it doesn't shock me, okay? So what I'm hopeful to do is to help you not only articulate your purpose, but really harness it and figure out ways to harness it and use it every single day, all right? You with me on this? Let me show you a construct. Most of us here in the natural products industry want to work for a company that's making a big difference in the world. I call it stage 3, radiating impact. How many of you would say you work for a company that's radiating impact? They have impact on their employees, they have impact on their stakeholders, their supply chain, right? They're radiating impact. Their investors are like-minded. They're in alignment. This is the goal. That's the orange circle to your right, okay? That's the farthest out there, stage 3. I call it stage 3, radiating impact. It doesn't start there. If we back up one from stage 3 to stage 2, we talk about scaling your business purpose, scaling the business why. How do you scale your why as a business? But I'm here to also tell you that stage 1 is likely the most important stage. The other stages don't happen. I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, hundreds of founders, hundreds of CEOs. The ones that understand their personal purpose and have harnessed it, they've harnessed that energy for the focus that they need and the drive, because starting a business or leading a team is not easy. It's not easy to do these things. So when you're on purpose and you know exactly why you exist, and you can hold that up as your North Star and harness that energy and drive that focus, then you can do stage 2 more effectively, scale your business impact. Then the business can radiate purpose, stage 3. Can everybody get there with me on that? Okay. I would also like to introduce you to yourself around being a business owner. If you're in this room, you're likely a leader within your company. And whether you're the founder or the CEO, you own your business. Can you put that hat on? It's not necessarily just a job. If it's a job for you, please find something else to do. Okay? But if you're in a business that's making some impact, and you are a part of that leadership team, you own a part of that business, whether it's logistics or marketing or even digital marketing, up and down the organization. And so what I wanted you to do is invite you to take that on and really own that for yourself as we talk about purpose. Once you plug into stage 1, your personal purpose, you can help your business accelerate even farther and faster. Make sense? I've worked with entrepreneur after entrepreneur that expresses this. My first entrepreneur I ever met was a guy named Jordan down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. He had Crohn's before anybody knew what Crohn's was. He was selling little black baggies of, people thought was dirt, and he was making a lot of money on it. I met him, and he was on purpose. He wanted to empower extraordinary health. He wanted everyone to get these health benefits, and I followed him on that journey. I've got a client who is an NFL lineman, a very, very good NFL lineman, high performance. He understood what it meant to be in the NFL, feel that high performance. He started a company now that's all about democratizing high performance, and he lives it and feels it. He is the guy. He's connected, right? We all know Yvon Chouinard and his story. Let My People Go Surfing, if you ever read the book, of course. Every entrepreneur that you can track this back to has done this. They know how to connect into their personal purpose, right? So I want to invite you to do the same thing. If you were to take just a second right now, and I encourage you, pull out your phones, pull out something to write on, go on this journey with me today over the next 48 minutes or so. Go on this journey with me and see if we can't hone this together. So if you were to take a shot at your personal purpose today, right now, couple of words, let me remind you, your personal purpose should answer the question, why? Why do I exist? Not who do I do it for, not what do I do, not how do I do it. It's the why. Okay, so if you were to answer this question for you and fill in just a couple of words, 2 or 3 words, I exist to, what comes to mind for you? Write it down. Okay? Go on this journey with me. All right? Good. So let's get inspired by Paul Lightfoot, right? So I want to show you what this looks like in action. I'm going to spend some time. Come on up, Paul. This is Paul Lightfoot, the general manager from Patagonia Provisions. Help me welcome Paul. Good to see you, man.
Hey, Rob.
How's it going? Yeah, please. Got my notes here, handy dandy notes. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We're here talking about purpose.
Yes.
How does that show up for you?
Do you want me to answer the question?
Yes, please.
I didn't have to think about it. I've written it down for myself many times. I exist to transform the food system for the sake of human health and for the sake of the planet's health.
Wow. Pretty tight. How'd this all start? You started off as a Wall Street lawyer, correct? You look just like a Wall Street lawyer to me.
I was very briefly a Wall Street lawyer.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted things when I was young that were not actually the things that I wanted.
Can you say more? How did you know you didn't want it? Like, what was the...
When I was there?
Mm-hmm.
So I went to this giant Wall Street law firm, a truly soulless organization. I mean, I learned a lot. It wasn't a bad experience, but it was very hard to get the job. And the people who made partner after 10 years was less than 10%. And I thought, well, these are terrible odds. I don't think I'm good enough for that, right? Just typical imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. And I realized after a year, the very best in my class left to do something else. And I thought, if Doug Chase left, maybe I'm misunderstanding what this game is. And then I just started really just looking around, and the people running the place, the partners, were super unhealthy, unhappy. None of them were in a first marriage. None of them seemed to have good relationships with their kids. And I thought, this is a shitty place to make a career.
That's great awareness for a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
So what'd you do with that?
I was so busy and so focused on succeeding at it, which was, occasionally sleep under your desk sort of stuff. It was really, really intense, that I didn't do anything until an outside event sort of changed it. My father, I also had a father died young, not as young as yours. So when I was 20, he had been dying for a long time, very slowly. But then all of a sudden, he was going to die, within a few months. I was in New York, my family was in California, and my mother called and said, you should think about how you want to be there for the end. Not for his sake, he's not going to necessarily know, but you're going to care how you showed up. And I just kept thinking about that, and I thought, I'm not going to show up at all. I'm working so much and so intensely that I'm not going to be there. And I decided right there to just leave. I thought, I'm a fungible cog in a world of fungible law firms and lawyers. It doesn't matter. I'm in this club, I can get back in it. And I just took a leave of absence, came out to California. And while I was there, I thought, I'm not going to go back to that. And it was while the dot-com boom was just booming, and I thought, well, that looks really exciting. And so I started an internet company back when there were very few internet companies.
I'm on that trail with you. Yeah, it was fun back then, wasn't it?
It was for a while.
I just started a company.
For a while. Yeah,
exactly.
So I just made something up.
Yeah. And so there was an energy driving you there, right?
There was a willingness to take risk. I had a bike that wasn't very valuable and a rent-stabilized apartment and no debt, no assets, no wife. It was just a great time to, set sail.
Right. And how'd that .com lead you to Bright Farms?
Oh, boy. The dot-com was wildly successful and then failed wildly. You know, the Wall Street Journal talked about how smart I was,
Yeah.
and 18 months later they talked about how stupid I was. I was the same guy, by the way. But, you know, the world perceived me differently before and after.
Yeah.
It was right after I was turning 30 that it ended. Someone had been watching me and asked me to come lead an enterprise software company that he owned that was a true mess. It was such a messy business. And I did that for almost 10 years. And that was really where I learned during my 30s, where I sort of grew up as a business person. Quarter after quarter, top and bottom line growth. No raised capital. It was all of our costs were funded by our AR from our clients, who were middle market retailers for the most part. And it was a decent career, but I was still missing something. Remember when I was a lawyer, it was pretty easy to see that it was a bad place to be. During my 30s, it was harder for me to see that running a software company didn't have enough for me, but I could feel it growing. And I was a really zealous food guy. Like in the way I fed myself and my family, my identity as a parent was very closely tied to food that was both healthy and good for the environment. And by the time I was nearing the end of my 30s, I thought, I want to do that. Like that's what I want to be spending my work on and my time and pouring my resources into. And I just came up with an idea for Bright Farms. I come up with a lot of ideas, are not that hard to come by. I gave the idea to someone that I thought might do it, and he said, it's a good idea, but he's like, I don't think I can raise capital. I don't think I can sell things to retailers. Right. And I thought, well, those are the things that I do. And I just went home to my wife and said, I'm almost 40, let's have a startup again.
Here we go.
Yeah, and she said no, by the way.
Of course, yeah, I know that experience too.
Because then I had 3 kids and a mortgage and, fancier bikes.
Yeah. You called yourself a zealous food guy.
Yeah.
There's an energy that makes you want to go home and tell your wife with the 3 kids that, hey, we're scrapping everything, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah.
And you called yourself a zealous food guy. I'm wondering where that came from. There's a thread there, right? Like, how did you become a zealous food guy?
I don't know. My 18-year-old son is a busboy in a restaurant right now, and I worked in restaurants all during high school, all during college, all during law school. And I don't know why. I remember in college I would be the guy cooking for my housemates. It wasn't from my parents. I don't know where it came from actually.
Wow.
I just know that by the time I was in my mid-30s, I sort of knew that's one of the things I cared most
about. Innate.
And by the way, many of you probably feel the way about food as well. It's really important for your health. So maybe, it's just sort of, maybe it's because my dad had been chronically ill for most of my life.
Wow. So it was innate.
You tell me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I'm telling you, yeah. So the experience at Bright Farms, what did it teach you? Where did it lead you?
So Bright Farms, I don't know if many of you know it, it didn't have a presence on the West Coast. It grew salads and greenhouses up and down, it still does, up and down the East Coast and the Midwest. It's now owned by Cox Enterprise, the big Atlantic conglomerate. It was a hard business, which in my experience has been most of my businesses.
Sure.
Super disruptive. We went after the Salinas salad industry, which we thought had some supply chain obstacles that were sort of structurally going to get worse, and we were right. And we went to retailers and basically partnered with them to build local, commercial scale local produce essentially. It taught me how to raise money on a bigger scale, raise hundreds of millions of dollars. It taught me how to partner with major supermarket chains on a really close but also scaled way. And it taught me how to grow up as a leader. Backstage we were talking about my leadership philosophies. That was when I honed the things that I had trialed in my 30s. This was my 40s, right? Mm-hmm. And it also taught me that I really, really wanted to be in food. I wanted to be proud of the food that I made, and I wanted to be proud of the impact that the food was making in the world. And during that journey, I learned, and this was sort of happenstance, like a soccer dad in my community and I both were not focused on regenerative agriculture. Mm-hmm. And over the course of my 40s, I determined that was probably where I should spend the rest of my career, which led me to initiate a long and careful transition out of Bright Farms, hired my successor, we sold the company, and here I am.
Yeah. And so lots of ups and downs in growing a company like that.
It was like a series of existential crises that ended well. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of a purpose at that point? I find that some people are just well, you were conscious.
Very
right?
conscious. Wrote it down, put it on the wall. Yeah.
And did it serve as that energy driver for you to kind of push through? Like,
very, very clearly and intentionally. Yeah, I would hire people for their values. Yes.
right,
Not just the values, but
right. And so now you've landed at Patagonia, of course. It seems like a perfect place. Tell me how you're expressing purpose there today. How's that looking for you?
Well, maybe I'll start with while I was finding the exit from Bright Farms was very careful, which is a euphemism for slow. Like, the acquirer and I agreed that we were going to do it in a way that was very low risk. It just went on for a long time by design, but which is an unnatural feeling as an entrepreneur. I'm like, let's go. And it gave me the chance to write a newsletter, to really think about what I wanted to do next. And a recruiter called me with this opportunity right at the end of that process, which was perfect timing, as you can imagine. And Patagonia had written like an 8-page PDF about their vision for a food business. And it was uncannily the same as a thesis I had written for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a niche thesis, like no one else was even talking about it. And I'm a big snow sports guy, I'm a big outdoors enthusiast. And when I only loved one brand already before I got this call, and it was Patagonia.
100%.
And so when I got the call, read that PDF, thought about it, I had 1,000 interviews. It's a very slow hiring place, and every one of them I ended by saying, I'm not playing hard to get. I'm ready to go. I will move. All 3 kids will change school. We'll move across the country. We'll sell both houses. My wife will change jobs, and
Let's go.
We did all that. Yeah.
And that electricity between your personal purpose and that business purpose was real, palpable.
Still is.
And I did some research. If we could put the slides back up real quick. I did some research and found your old manifesto. How old is this? How long ago did you write this?
So I had been writing a newsletter about regenerative agriculture and the power of brands to be demand magnets for transforming farmland. And this was an edition of that newsletter that I think was in October of 2021. I went on a retreat that was about finding like the vision for what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Right.
And during that, I wrote a manifesto and hit send on the newsletter, and I haven't seen this in years. But the first line is the same thing I said earlier, right?
Yep.
So I'm still following that.
That's so good. Yeah. What advice do you have for folks who are maybe they've tapped into their purpose and they need to really harness it to push forward, or maybe they're trying to explore what their purpose might be? What kind of advice might you give?
I'm always reluctant to give advice. We're all different, but I will.
Sure.
You're all in food, right? And presumably, if you're thinking about purpose, you're thinking about either health or environmental impact. At least I hope many of you are, because that's one of the key levers that food can be used for. I just encourage everyone to do a little bit like Yvonne Chouinard has always done, which is to just keep asking questions about where things come from. And in food in particular, a lot of people aren't really awake to the fact that food that's produced with synthetic fertilizer is made from fossil fuels. It's made from synthetic fertilizer, made from natural gas, so it's fossil food. So like that's my first advice, like keep asking where things come from, and don't be afraid to say to yourself, I'm dissatisfied with a part of the story. One of the things I like about Patagonia is that we don't make lists of the things we're proud of and happy and talk about them out loud. We make lists of things that we're dissatisfied with, and then we focus on those things. And you never hear us put out a press release saying we're doing great, And I think the second bit of advice I'd give, and I think this is really useful, is that you can be paid well in a company that does good things, and you can be paid well in a company that does bad things. You're going to be happier if you choose the one that does good things. Working in a way all day long that's consistent with your values and makes you proud of the fruits of your labor is just a happier way to go through life. And you'll be happier the way you talk to your kids and your neighbors, be a little bit more righteous at cocktail parties. It's better.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time, Paul. Great stuff.
My pleasure, Ron.
You're an
Thank you.
inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Help me thank Paul appropriately.
Thank you.
Thanks. So again, I ask you, why do you exist? Maybe Paul was inspiring for you. Take a minute, write down a couple of things that comes to mind for you. Did you feel that energy? Did you see his manifesto? Have you ever written something like that down? Like, there's some energy in that. There's some real energy. And I've experienced this one sentence, I exist too, whatever that is for you, as a real core source of that energy and focus. It becomes a North Star that you can kind of align everything to. Does that make sense? So for the next few minutes, let's dig into a little more inspiration around how you might really harness your personal purpose. So for some inspiration, here's several people you might know. Oprah, she says her purpose is to be a teacher and to be known for inspiring my students to be more than they thought they could be. Can you feel that why? There's a why there, right? Larry Page to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. He and Sergey Brin probably didn't have the same purpose, but they coalesced behind a purpose that became Google. And I think they're doing this pretty well. Love or hate their practices, they're on purpose, right? Mark Zuckerberg, he's all about the power of community and bringing the world closer together. Do you feel the why, bringing the world closer together? There's a why there. Elon Musk, love him or hate him, he's on purpose when it comes to making life interplanetary, multiplanetary. I don't know about the X thing, okay? Can't connect that one. But all of his previous companies are all about getting man to Mars, making life multiplanetary. Like I said, love him or hate him, the man is on purpose. Steve Jobs, all those words, and then to make a dent in the universe. Love that, right? I firmly believe that if you harness your personal purpose, anyone can make a small or giant dent in the universe, right? And then Brene Brown, to help people live more authentically and embrace vulnerability as a source of strength. All very different, all have different and varying degrees of energy, okay? So again, I'm going to keep asking you these questions. What are those 2 words? What are those 3 words that you might be filling in the blank with right about now? What's coming to mind for you? All right? There's some work you can do around this. This is a simple approach. There's a lot of work you can do to really harness your purpose. I love this one. I don't know if I'm saying it right or even if it's the right definition, but ikigai, any Japanese here? Right? Ikigai, Japanese term that basically means the reason for being is what I understand. And this is how they map that out. Ikigai is right in the middle. It sits right in the middle of what you love to do. If you had to roll out of bed every day at 4:30 a.m. and do something all day, what would give you a smile jumping out of bed at 4:30? What is that thing that you love to do? What the world needs. Maybe you're really passionate about plastic, or you're really passionate about pets or animals, or really passionate about something that your community needs locally. What fires you up? Maybe it's education, anything. That's that whole concept of what the world needs right now. Going back to those significant events in your life, if you harness those significant events, I think it'll point to something that you think the world needs, right? So if you were to jot down a few things on what the world needs right now that you are really passionate about, what might that be? What are you good at? When you show up and people ask you to do something because they know you're going to nail it, what is it? What is it people are asking you to do because it's so easy for you and you wonder why it's not easier for other people? And then in the Ikigai world, what can I be paid for? I firmly believe that if you harness these other 3 things, and understand it in a big way and start talking about it, allowing that energy to flow for yourself around the other 3 things, why you exist, the job will materialize. Think about Paul. Here's an on-purpose human being who landed at probably the most on-purpose company on the planet, right? He manifested that. Firmly believe it, 100%. So these 3 things, and then what can you be paid for, kind of all meet in the middle, ikigai, a reason for being. Why do I exist, right? Here's another approach that we use in our workbook, which I'll invite you guys to at the end of the speech. We've got a workbook on how to uncover your personal purpose. We talk about I'm on purpose when I'm using my gifts of X, Y, and Z. while doing these things that I get called to do, with the intention to result in something, okay? So if you're gonna fill in these blanks, it starts to point you towards your purpose, all right? So here's how I fill in my blanks. I'm on purpose when I use my gifts of vision, storytelling, and strategic thinking while inspiring, equipping, and connecting leaders. These are the things that I do with the intention to result in scalable impact, thriving businesses, and radical evolution of capitalism. I run a company called Scale Passion. Our purpose at Scale Passion is radically evolving capitalism. We are aiming towards capitalism 3.0, and we want to be a major lever in the move towards hitting 3.0. Not 2.0 Milton Friedman, 3.0, okay? That's why we exist. That's the purpose that we harness. So you can see how this starts poking on that, right? It starts to push towards that. So I then bring that all down to my I exist to statement, I exist to, and I boiled that down over many, many years of working on this to scale impact. My 2 words are scale impact. I want to scale impact personally for you as a leader and for your company, with the result being stage 3, radiating impact, right? And if we get enough leaders and enough companies doing this, guess what will result? Capitalism 3.0, radically evolving capitalism. That's how I plug in, okay? That's the way I plug in. Now, let's talk to Courtney Pineau of the Climate Collaborative. She's the executive director. Come on up, Courtney. And we're going to find out how another leader might harness her purpose. Hi, Courtney.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good to see
How are
you.
you?
Thanks.
All right. I have known you for quite a long time.
A long time, yeah.
And I experience you as always working for a company that's on purpose. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
I think I discovered at a really young age that I wanted to be working in alignment with kind of my soul's calling, I guess. And that's continued to evolve. But I think now, particularly through some of the work, and I'm happy to share a little bit more about this, the work that we've been doing at the Climate Collaborative, I've become more and more clear that really my core purpose is around helping people experience and live into our collective potential to create transformational change in the world. And I think it's come through over and over again in my career, but it's only been actually relatively recently that I understood some of the nuances around that.
You said my soul's purpose.
Yeah.
What do you think that came from?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this since you and I talked before, and I think for me, a lot of it came out of how I grew up. So I grew up in a big family in Baltimore, Maryland. And one of the things that was kind of unique about my family is that there was a lot of love in the household, but there was this really interesting quality of almost essentially being kind of like cloistered off from the world. And there were these adages that were said in our household all the time as I was growing up. And they sound kind of heavy to say them on stage, but things like, nobody's your friend, or everybody will stab you in the back. You can't trust anybody. And I think at a really young age, I never bought into that. Like I had this very visceral experience of like the energy of that. And I just never really bought in. I just remember hearing it and kind of being like, whatever. And then I had these opportunities when I was probably a teenager to start working in all of this movement building work. And some of it was like Amnesty International or Greenpeace or other types of environmental movements. And there was this, again, this visceral quality of like, oh my gosh, this is what I want more of, right? Like there was this feeling of warmth and being at home with this community of working together collectively to make the world a better place. And I just knew, I was like, whatever this is what I want to be doing in my life.
You mentioned visceral quality, feeling. There's kind of a body thing.
There's a somatic feeling to it.
Yeah.
There's definitely a somatic feeling
Very
to it.
somatic. Yeah. How is that expressing across your career? You can probably draw a line. Well, let me ask you what I asked Paul. Was this conscious for you, or was it more unconscious, kind of an unconscious thread that was kind of leading you from non-GMO, I mean, all the different things that you've touched on? Was it conscious for you, like it was for Paul, or was it more unconscious?
I think in some levels it was conscious, in some levels it was unconscious. So I knew that I wanted to be working with a mission-driven food company. I never thought like, oh, I'm going to go work for a certification. But I was definitely bought into the purpose of the non-GMO project. I mean, when you and I met, this orientation around people having transparency in terms of the food that they were eating, I could really buy into that. And one of the things that we used to talk about that, again, I think aligns with my orientation towards being in service to our planet is, at that time, it was around protecting the integrity of our seed supply. And for me, that was very near and dear to my heart. And so we were a very purpose-driven organization. And one of the things that was so unique about the non-GMO project that has helped inform my work is that we got to see, and I mean, you were there for this, you and I were working together on this, is that there was this collective potential of people coming together, and you had distribution and retailers and CPG and consumers. And here we were like this little teeny team of just a couple of people, similar to the Climate Collaborative. And yet the impact, not that we were having as an organization, but the movement was having together, was really profound. And when I experienced that, I was like, this could be applied many other places, and I want to be doing this. I want to be doing this kind of movement building work.
Yeah.
So I think that has continued to stay really true for me.
Yeah, that brings up, like, we worked with competition. Like, I was the one calling competition, we were calling folks, and it created a bond between competition that was way bigger than just competing, and we were making a movement together.
Yep.
And so this industry is ripe for that,
Yeah.
that kind of partnership and competition.
Yeah.
Much like me, I think my purpose, for example, when I worked for Garden of Life, I didn't know it then, it was unconscious, but I can draw a thread back to scaling impact.
Right.
Where Jordan was more about health, right? And so I think for you as well, you've touched on different kinds of movements, but there was a thread that was your personal purpose.
Right.
And the point I want to make is you can have a personal purpose that plugs in with somebody else's purpose, right?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I think that, like I said, there's like layers to it. And one of the things that I really value about the work at the Climate Collaborative is that my associate director and I, Caitlin Olson, we were really oriented towards learning. We happen to have access to incredible teachers like the late Carol Sanford, Otto Scharmer, who will be speaking today. And I think that we have this orientation towards this recognition that collaboration is critical to accelerating climate action at scale. But the form that takes, like when we talk about collective potential, it is nuanced. Like, we're learning, we're continuing to kind of like hold ourselves accountable to, like, how can we do this better? And for us, like, collaboration is just thrown around all the time. And I think that we equate it oftentimes with partnership, but really for us, it's not only like the outcome of the work, but it's the very nature of the work itself, like how we're working together, how we're bringing like what you did with the supplement working group. It's like, how do you bring competitors into the room, and then how do you create the conditions for something to emerge that maybe nobody ever expected? And I think that's really cool. That's a really cool thing to have happen.
That's so good. It makes me think about collective purpose and how each of the folks in the collective have their individual purpose. So, and we're plugging in different ways, but there's a common thread. You see what I mean? There's a thread. As a leader, do you think about your team's purpose? Like, I mean, I'm trying to make this more conscious for folks.
Yeah,
you see what I mean? It's largely unconscious. We can connect in with it energetically, but I just wonder, like, when you're on your team, you think about Caitlin, you think about other people on your team, I bet you could spot their purpose or say, you could probably call it out even if you haven't done the work to really harness it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do think about it, and we have language that seems to work really well for us, which is oftentimes when we're looking at an opportunity in front of us. Of course, we have to evaluate for all the things that any of us that are in businesses have to evaluate for, like the impact on our bottom line or our engagement metrics. But there's this question that we oftentimes ask ourselves, which actually came out of some of the work that we've done with Renourish Studio, which came out of Carol Sanford's work. And there's this question about, like, does this increase my will? And for us, this idea that, like, your will is really driven by being in alignment with your purpose and your essence. And also that for us, because our mission happens to align with that, then it becomes a really good kind of metric, essentially, to assess, like, is this something that is lifting up our energy that we really feel drawn to moving into? And we use that language all the time, because there will be opportunities that come up where it's like, this seems like a good opportunity. We could do this, but is this actually our work to do? And sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah, I love how what I'm hearing you say is that there's a real intention around the personal purpose, and then there's the business purpose and making sure that it's connected.
Yeah.
And that's where the energy is. It's huge energy.
Yeah, and we talk about that with our board. I mean, the board, I think we're really blessed to have a board that's also really in alignment with our core beliefs. We did a lot of work when I first joined the Climate Collaborative to really challenge some of the assumptions that were actually some of the foundation of the organization, and kind of coming to the board and saying, like, wow, we were founded on this, but here are some of the things that we believe, and we're curious about continuing to evolve kind of our theory of change and why we exist as an organization, and that's ongoing.
Climate Collaborative is, and many of the other organizations you work for, is putting out into the world a very clear version of why you exist, which is attracting the right people.
Right.
So not to put you on the spot, but throughout your career, it doesn't have to be Climate Collaborative, but have you ever had a person that was on the team that didn't fit the purpose?
Definitely.
And can you talk a little bit about that, maybe how, talk a little bit about that, maybe how you handled that as a leader, as a leader of an organization, and what that means?
Yeah, I probably have had more experiences like that when I was at the Non-GMO Project. One of the things that I know you've probably experienced this is that when you have a really young organization, I was the third full-time employee at the Non-GMO Project. In the early days, like, we were all deeply, deeply engaged in the work. And I think for us, like, we could, again, going back to that visceral quality, there was like a part of us, we would just show up. It didn't matter if, like, you need to take the garbage out or you need to be setting up a booth. We were willing to commit ourselves fully. And as the organization grew, you started to see that people were showing up and it was more of a job. And I think what ended up happening is that oftentimes people kind of self-select. Like, it doesn't really align, and they're going to continue to chase something that probably pays better or is less work. And in other cases, there really was an opportunity to have a difficult conversation, which is this the right role for you? Yeah. And I think as a leader, we need to be willing to have those difficult conversations of, this doesn't really feel like a good match, and maybe there's an opportunity for you to reflect on that and us to reflect on that, and then see, like, are we continuing to show up?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that the health of the tribe depends on those conversations. I'm also a big believer that everyone has a purpose that'll connect somewhere.
Right. Oh, sure.
And I love you too much to let you stay here because it's not connecting with ours, right? So go do your work, go find it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for folks who are poking around at this, or trying to make the unconscious more conscious, or trying to harness it even more? Are there any watch outs you would tell folks who are in this journey?
I would say that there's this, I don't know I wouldn't call it a tool, but there's something that we say in our household that just tends to work really well for me, which is we oftentimes talk about breadcrumbs, like following the breadcrumbs, and that I believe that the universe really wants us to be living into our purpose, right? And that really, when you start to get on that path, it's like there are these breadcrumbs in front of you. And my husband's here in the room, he works in the industry as well, and we oftentimes will say, it'll just be like a passing thing. Like, for instance, I'm very, very passionate about bees, and I look to bees as teachers, and something will come up about bees, and like he'll look over at me and just say, like, breadcrumb, and it's like those breadcrumbs oftentimes are right around us, and it's amazing how that energy starts to build. And I think starting to attune to that and letting it just continue to kind of let you know that you're on the right path.
Love it. Last question. How would you fill out the blank, I exist to?
Well, in thinking about it, I mean, to be really candid, it's kind of an evolution of my purpose, which is really, I feel like I exist to be in service to our incredible planet. And it sounds like that's very like work focused, but I mean it in like every sense of the term, like in terms of play and energy, and it just, when the work is hard, it lifts me up so much. And I think we are so, so blessed to live in a planet that's just full of abundance and mystery and love, and that feeds me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of lots of folks, thank you for the impact you've had on this industry and for your inspiration.
Well,
Really
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for
Courtney.
starting my day this
Help
way.
me thank Courtney. Thank you so much, Courtney. Awesome. So Courtney kind of highlighted how purpose is individual, but it's also collective. It starts to connect in. So hopefully you can feel that energy, right? Hopefully, I hope and pray that each of you are feeling that on the team you're on today. Like if you're not on that team today, do the personal work because it'll start to guide and point you towards the right team and where it all wants to go. So if you had to fill out your purpose statement right now, how would you complete this sentence? I exist too, okay? So just as a reminder, it is the beginning. Purpose starts in the blue bubble, the light blue bubble. First, harness your purpose and lead yourself. If you haven't made it conscious, I would submit it's very hard for you to harness it. Does that make sense? I've got my purpose statement everywhere, okay? Everywhere. I want to know it. It's my North Star. I want to make sure that I'm harnessing it. Once you harness that, it brings the energy and the focus needed to really accelerate it into whatever your connection is to your business, your tribe, your nonprofit, your community, whatever it is. Then it makes that connection easier and more conscious. It's where the energy comes from. So claim your purpose, right? So here's just a few examples of some folks that I've worked with and some purpose statements that might inspire you. I exist to make you feel the world is a playground. If you know Enneagram, Santi is an Enneagram 7 like myself. It makes a lot of sense then, right? I exist to care for the caregivers through food. Katie's a wonderful entrepreneur I'm working with right now who supported her father when he was ill, and she was kind of the oldest at a very young age. So her significant event led her to a purpose that is now connecting very clearly into her business. She's here at the event. I exist to unlock trapped potential. Beautiful. I exist to catalyze purpose in others. Nick was my first executive coach. He unlocked my potential, and he's doing it for folks every single day in his job and his role. And what he's trying to do is make sure that he narrows out all the things that doesn't feed this. He's committed to really narrowing it down. I exist to bring clarity to uncertainty. I know these people, so it's making me smile. These folks are so good at this. It's something that's easy for them. It just flows. I exist to create stability that enables growth. This happens to be a CFO, okay? CFOs can have purpose statements too, believe it or not, okay? I exist to guide becoming. That's a beautiful one to me. I exist to co-pilot authorship. Now, a lot of these have been worked on for some time, right? It's a process. It's iterative. It's like carving the stone away to get to the statue of David, right? It's iterative. So wherever you start. Okay? I exist too. What do you love? What do you love deeply? Where do you show up and it's easy? Where is the flow? What are you being called to do? Where's the flow? What change does the world need to make? What do you get crazy about? What sets you off? What makes you angry? What makes you sad? What brings you joy? These are all the questions that you go through when you're identifying these things and pushing on it, okay? So just to round out the story on my dad actually beat cancer. He went on to live until about 4 or 5 years ago. He set a tone for me that is going to be with me forever. He was fired from his job at Eastern Airlines, if anybody remembers Eastern Airlines, and he followed his own purpose and started pulling on his strings or following his breadcrumbs, as Courtney mentioned, and it led him to grief counseling. He had some friends who were dealing with death of a loved one, and they basically pulled him aside and said, "You're really good at this. You're really good at this thing of bringing some comfort to me after the death of a loved one." So he started volunteering for hospice. That led to a master's degree in grief counseling. That led to him being a professor and teaching other people how to do grief counseling. He actually was a co-founder of a camp outside of Tampa that brought in hundreds of kids over the years that had lost one or both of their parents and helped children, help children deal with their grief. He's honored with the Volunteer of the Year Award. My mom and I went there last year to give it out in his name. Incredible man. Pulled on his strings, tapped into his purpose, made real impact in the world. Okay? So I'm proud to have known him. What about you? What about you? Are you nailing this? Are you doing the work to make it unconscious and conscious and to plug into the energy that comes from purpose and to bring that to whatever you're doing, whatever that community might look like? My company has created a Uncover Your Personal Purpose workbook. It's iterative. It's a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. You can download it at this site, scalepassion.com/Expo West. Reach out to me if I can support. But we're really excited about trying to, as a company, help leaders step into this. I exist to scale impact. My company exists to radically evolve capitalism. It starts with leaders who lean in on this stage one, personal purpose. That's where it starts, okay? So if you're ready to start, grab the workbook, dig in. Hopefully you've gotten some value today, and I really invite you on this journey of purpose. Thank you so much today. We have time for any questions? Anybody want to throw out a question? We have a few minutes. Anybody want to share their purpose statement? All of you raised your hands. I exist to. Let's hear some. Go ahead, sir. What's your name?
My name is Ali.
Ali, nice to meet you.
My purpose in life is I exist to bring the true potential of everyone that I come across.
Bring the true potential of everyone that you come across. Thank you, Ali. That's great. Anyone else want to share or have a question? Yes?
I exist to shine light in dark places.
I exist to shine light in dark places. Do you get some energy from that?
Yeah.
Have you done some work on that?
Yeah.
Awesome. What's your name?
Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Good.
I want to use my company to help brands that improve. I want to use my company to help brands that improve people's lives succeed.
Perfect. Yeah. My challenge. What's your name?
Len Circoni.
Lynn. My challenge to you, Lynn, is to make that more personal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Anyone else? Thank you for your time today. Enjoy Expo West. It's going to be a great week. Thank you. Courtney?
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I see folks milling about here. We are going to transition right into Climate Day. So welcome to Climate Day 2025. Today feels really special to me. What a great way to start the day. Thank you for joining us with Rob Craven. You know, we have this opportunity right now to be gleaning insights together, understanding opportunities, developing new collaborations, because we need those more than ever. So we're deeply thankful to New Hope, who has enabled us to have this platform, to Trodden, New Hope's sponsor of Climate Day, and to the ongoing sponsors of the Climate Collaborative. So what I'd like to do really quickly is at least give you a sense of the flow of the day so you know what sessions. There's going to be sessions actually starting over in Grand Ballroom E as well. So here's your roadmap. At 9 o'clock, there will be 2 concurrent sessions. In this room, we'll have disrupting carbon-intensive commodity models. In Grand Ballroom E, we'll have emerging policy opportunities in 2025 and beyond. Then from 10 o'clock to 10:15, we'll have a short break. At 10:15, in this ballroom, we'll have leveraging and building Scope 3 value chain partnerships for collective impact. And in Grand Ballroom E, we'll have emerging opportunities in food waste. Then from 11:15 to 11:45, we'll have a break for lunch. There'll be a resource fair. The resource fair has over 20 companies, has an amazing art exhibit that was curated by Mad Agriculture. And then all afternoon sessions will be taking place in this ballroom, so you want to be back by 11:45 sharp, because that's when we'll start moving into our keynote speakers for the day. At 11:55, we'll have From Chaos to Coherence. The aligned reporting initiatives work to streamline and standardize sustainability disclosure. And then at 12:40, we'll have a panel conversation strengthening the case for regenerative agriculture, emerging opportunities in nutrient density, consumer engagement, and biodiversity. This session will dive into making the case for investment at scale in regen. There'll be a lot of really interesting emerging information, so if this is an area that you're interested in, definitely don't want to miss that session. At 1:40, we are beyond thrilled to have Otto Scharmer provide a keynote called Presencing 7 Practices for Transforming Self, Society, and Business. You don't want to miss this session. He's incredible. At 2:20, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Danny Nierenberg and Jerome Foster II in a fireside chat. Jerome was recently honored as Time Magazine's Next Generation Leader. He is also extraordinary. And then for our last keynote of the, at 2:45, we'll have a lightning round. So we'll have multiple speakers, and each will be speaking to kind of emerging opportunities in the climate space, some really interesting information there. And then for our last keynote of the day, we'll have a CEO panel, Tariffs, Trade Wars, and Funding Freezes, Navigating Climate Action in this New Era. And we'll have four amazing CEOs kind of really speaking to the moment we're in. At the close of the day at 4 o'clock, we'll have a cocktail reception, which will be over in the resource fair. So join us for another opportunity to network and eat some food and get to experience all of our service providers. So with that, welcome to Climate Day. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And as I said, there will be a session here, and there will also be a session now over in Grand Ballroom E. Take care.
So far away.
Good morning. It's so exciting to see so many new and familiar faces at what is probably not a surprise, but my favorite day of the year, which is Climate Day at Expo West. I'm Caitlin Olson, the Associate Director at the Climate Collaborative. And before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping notes. So we are live streaming all of the sessions in here today, and we'll also be recording them. So in case you need to jump out or want to share this conversation with a colleague, you'll be able to do so. I'm really excited to be moderating today's session on exploring alternative sourcing models that help move us away from the carbon-intensive commodity model that harms our farmers, communities, and the climate. As probably many of you in this room know, our current food system is failing in many ways. Food is increasingly unaffordable, farming communities face economic and climate instability, and our farm workers endure unsafe working conditions. To build a food system that supports our climate, we really must think about the dominant sourcing model and shift toward approaches that are climate smart, equitable, and resilient. This transformation requires moving beyond transactional commodity sourcing to systems that foster deep, mutually beneficial partnerships across the supply chain. Our panelists today represent just a fraction of those that are most impacted by the current system, and our hope with this discussion is that it really kind of helps to spark ideas and action to help brands rethink sourcing models and drive meaningful change. With that, I'm so thrilled to introduce today's speakers. As the head of sustainability and mission at Simple Mills, Christina Schoenberg leads the company's initiatives to advance human and planetary health. Christina oversees a series of global regenerative agriculture programs and an innovation framework that embeds ecosystem and dietary health metrics of success into the company's product design process. Prior to Simple Mills, Christina had held multiple roles at food companies and organizations supporting mission-driven food companies, including leading sustainability for the brands Annie's and Cascadian Farm, and serving as the Director of Operations at the Good Food Awards. Jane Kuhn had sustainability at Once Upon a Farm, the leading childhood nutrition brand. At O Farm, her work is focused on sustainability strategy development. This includes key initiatives for environmental and social stewardship in the supply chain through strategic supplier relationships and ingredient selections and continuous improvement within packaging. Prior to working in the CPG industry, Jane spent 10 seasons farming produce. She studied sociology and agroecology and has an MBA in sustainable solutions. Luke Peterson is a first-generation farmer of 1,200 acres in Lac Parley County, Minnesota, and is the Regenerative Organic Alliance flagship farm for the Midwest. USDA Organic Certified since 2015 and Regenerative Organic Certified, or ROC, since 2022. His mission is to grow food alongside of innovative consumer packaged good partners to grow both healthier food and a more resilient landscape through good farming and good business. Luke upholds the highest known standards for soil health, animal welfare, and farmer fairness. He believes that through direct trade partnerships and local food systems, we can create an abundant, diverse, and equitable economy of collaboration. He believes the more diverse an ecosystem is, the better chance it has to survive and thrive, and that drives his diverse crop rotation, cover crops, perennials, and the rotational grazing of a grass-fed beef herd. Luke lives on the farm with his wife, Allie, and his 3 children. So, I'm really excited for this conversation. Maybe, I think before we get any farther, it'd be really great to have some context setting. And perhaps, Christina and Jane, you could each share a little bit about your sourcing models. I'd be really curious to know in particular what the key drivers were that pushed your organizations towards adopting a new sourcing model. Was it a response to the climate crisis, farmer needs, business imperatives, or something else? And maybe Christina, if you wouldn't mind getting us started.
Yeah, sure. So our direct trade program with sunflower growers in the Midwest, like Luke, came out of a lot of different factors, a little bit of all of the above. But one of the ways I like to think about how we make decisions at Simple Mills is we look at this intersection of consumer insights and what we call farmer insights. And we look at that intersection because we want to make decisions that are considering the full context of the supply system. And with that, we spend a lot of time talking to farmers like Luke, and we've learned a ton in that process. So we've learned, for one, that most of the farmer partners we work with really don't need any convincing that things like soil health are important or ecosystem resilience is important. We share those values. But we do hear that farmers face some headwinds in implementing practices like cover cropping, extended diverse crop rotations, rotational grazing, partly because of how our food system is designed to disproportionately place risk on the farm level of the supply chain. So with that, we really see our role at Simple Mills as helping partner to remove barriers to implementing those practices, and also to co-invest in the upfront cost of those practices. So our direct trade program started in 2020. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary at Luke's farm back in August. We also work with a wonderful partner, John Strophus. I don't know if he's here today, but he is a farmer himself, and he helps us manage the contracts and parts of the supply chain. We've worked with, I think, 13 growers over 3 states in the Midwest, and about 3,000 acres to date. And the contracts in this program are designed really intentionally. So there are a few pieces to it. So one, we pay for the cost of planting seed, and that's to show our upfront commitment to the farmer to say, hey, we're in this with you. We pay a per acre reimbursement for the implementation of certain practices. So that could be like covering the cost of cover crop seed, or paying for fencing for rotational livestock grazing, or maybe it's paying for a roller crimper to terminate cover crop without using an herbicide. We really defer to the farmer to choose those practices and whatever equipment they want reimbursed, because they know the context of their farm systems a lot better than we do. We also structure the contracts to have an acreage offtake guarantee. So in other words, for the contracted acres, we will take everything that comes off of those fields, even if the yield is higher one year. So the farmer doesn't need to go looking for an alternate market, for example. And then lastly, just this last year, we were so excited to start our first multi-year contracts with 3 of the growers in the program. Luke is one of them. And that was after a lot of feedback and discussion and really understanding that that would be differential for growers. So we're doing that to really provide more certainty year over year so that the farmers can better plan out their rotations and have a little bit more stability. And the last thing I'll just say is that this program is really iterative. So we get a lot of very honest, very helpful feedback from the growers every year. And with that, we make little tweaks and we evolve the program. So I imagine it will look different again next year.
Awesome. Just a little background, if you're not familiar with our products or brand. not unlike, so some background on our current sourcing model. We are a multi-ingredient brand. We source over 100 different ingredients. And not like many other multi-ingredient brands, our supply chain is incredibly complex. These 100+ ingredients come from domestic sources, but also global sources. We source a lot of produce, fruits and vegetables, and specifically organic fruits and vegetables. And so when we asked ourselves what would it look like to do more, to go beyond organic, for us in our supply chain, given that organic produce is so labor intensive, farmer and farm worker well-being is the most material issue area for us to focus on. And as we have leaned into this focus area, one of the pillars through which we are taking action on this is through a strategic sourcing partnership with the Equitable Food Initiative, or EFI. And if you're not familiar, EFI is a nonprofit that is dedicated to transforming agriculture and improving the lives of farm workers. And they have a myriad of initiatives through which they go about this mission, one of which is a rigorous third-party audited certification that was designed specifically for produce fields and pack houses. And in 2024, we last year became the first consumer goods brand to source and pay premiums on fruit from Equitable Food Initiative certified farms. We procured over 7 million pounds of certified fruit, which represents about 30% by volume of the ingredients in our core portfolio. So given how complex our supply chain is and how many ingredients we source, this is a first step that we're really proud of. I will also be the first to say that certifications are not perfect. Certifications aren't going to save the world on their own. However, something I admire most about EFI's certification is that it really implores culture change at the farm level. It implores continuous improvement, and it really implores worker voice to be central and informing the operations at the farm, which is a paramount shift from the status quo. So it's not a checkbox certification by any means. And a couple of the things that drove this shift, or kind of guiding our attention towards farmer and farm worker well-being. One, to our leadership team's credit, one of the first conversations I had with them when I joined the company a few years ago, they said, hey, we're really proud of being organic, but what would it look like to do more? So I applaud their curiosity, and that question came out of their leadership leading a PBC, a public benefit corporation, and a B Corp. Also, when we start to get to know our supply chain and identify what are the vulnerabilities, how do we set ourselves up for long-term resiliency? This is an answer. I say that not as a destination, but a journey, to that question. And lastly, the business imperative is really baked in. We have seen that the quality of the fruit is better. When workers are well cared for, the quality of the fruit goes up, and that's something that we certainly care a lot about.
I love both of those approaches and appreciate you sharing a little bit of that context as we dive further in this conversation. Luke, you have a really unique story, and I would love it if you could just share a little bit about your farm and provide maybe a little bit of a firsthand perspective on how the sourcing model that Christina shared a little bit about has impacted your operations. And I'd also be curious in what ways that model aligns with or supports the goals you're working on your farm more broadly.
Yeah. So we started farming about 12 years ago, started conventionally. Prior to farming, I should add that my job was within the Department of Natural Resources with prairie restoration. So when I got involved with conventional agriculture, I quickly realized that it was getting very difficult for me to ignore what I had learned at the Department of Natural Resources and how an ecosystem functioned. So that pushed me into organic agriculture. Once I got into organic agriculture, I quickly realized that organic is becoming industrialized, and that just moved me into regenerative agriculture. So we farm 12 to 1,400 acres this year, certified ROC. We have a diverse crop rotation that lasts up to 12 to 15 years. We have integrated livestock onto the cropland as a fertility source. Every acre is cover cropped, and everything goes into the winter untilled and with crop residue on top. So we're managing a diverse system, and when I started farming, I knew that because of my geographical location and the competitiveness that there is in agriculture, I would need to make friends in the food industry. I would need to make friends with ingredient buyers. There isn't a market for these crops where I'm from. If you think about the United States or the world, we grow corn and soybeans in this part of the country. We grow wheat in this part of the country. We grow our fruits and vegetables in this part of the country. And it's all becoming so simplified for the sake of efficiency. And going against that efficient system is very difficult. So back to my comment about I needed to make friends. And one of my friends that I made was Christine was at Simple Mills. And it's a relationship business. And you know, it's an example of how important it is if you go down this path that you remain committed, because both sides are trying to do their best. And I think that it's important that we meet each other in the middle and just hear what each other has to say and try to pick a path forward. And you know, we've been working together 5 years. I think it took 3 years before we had a multi-year contract, but that is the first multi-year contract that I have. And so to the middle part of your question, that multi-year contract is very important when you consider that I have a 12-year rotation. I'm not asking for a 12-year commitment, but to get a 2-year commitment is a big deal for me and my family. So we put the investment as a family to put these crops in the ground, to rent the soil, to buy the equipment, and to have that assurance when we go to bed at night that we're gonna push the envelope, do the next best thing, probably fail at it, but then knowing that we will have a market the following year is a very big deal, and is something that is not very common. So. And then another piece is we share in the risk factor for implementing one of the regenerative practices, which is cover crops. The per acre basis that we partner on. I take half the cost, Simple Mill takes half the cost, and then we can do the work such as cover cropping. And then also with the seed reimbursement. The nice thing about the seed reimbursement is that I can say, that was the seed that you gave me to plant. And that's also a really intricate thing when you're selling ingredients as a farmer, are the different varieties that are out there and how they work in CPG companies' products. So my point I'm trying to make is there's a ton of collaboration, a ton of communication, and yeah, it's been good.
I love that. The phrase that came to mind as you were sharing is like moving at the speed of trust. And I think that that's really, you know, for you sharing that it took 3 years to get that multi-year contract. This piece around the relational aspect, I guess, is what I want to keep highlighting, is that this work, I think, especially those of us maybe working in the climate space, I think that feels really enlivening, is that the opportunity to not just be in a transactional arrangement with someone, but the opportunity to go deeper in relationship. And I think that also really brings more joy to the work. You know, kind of continuing on this thread, I know there's a lot of your peers, climate practitioners, sustainability folks, sourcing folks in the room today. And as I know many of us are aware, there's currently, you know, significant uncertainty in the food industry regarding the implications of the shifting agricultural landscape, tariffs, and workforce. And I'm curious, I imagine that these factors will likely impact how companies approach sourcing. And I'm curious if you think that your sourcing models might help reduce costs, or alternatively, what advice would you give your peers to help advocate for this model with their CFO, or help make that business case? And maybe Jane, we'll start with you.
Sure. When having this conversation, either internally with your team or externally in environments like this, I always think it's important to first differentiate between price and cost. Because usually when this conversation is being had, it's about price. And I interpret that as price is like, a line item on COGS. But the reality is there are often so many costs that are hidden in that price, that are externalized, and someone is paying for them, if not now, in the future. And so when I think of the potential costs of a truckload of raw material that we have to turn away because it doesn't meet our quality standards, when I think of the potential cost of food safety risks, when I think of the potential cost of instability in labor availability to even pull the crops out of the field, then yes, absolutely. The program that we are building around farm worker well-being absolutely, is in service of preventing and minimizing those costs.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Christina, what about for you?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that when we buy sunflower seeds in this program, we understand that we're buying a lot more than sunflower seeds. We know that we're making a really important investment in families, in rural economies, in climate action, and really importantly for Simple Mills, we're making an investment in our own supply resilience. So certainly in times of geopolitical uncertainty, like the Ukraine crisis, in the face of tariffs, it's really handy to have deep, trusted sourcing partnerships that are domestic. So that's an element of risk buffering, right? We also have the ability to go visit these farms frequently, and we have direct line of sight to the quality of the ingredients and the people and places growing them. And then these multi-year contracts are beneficial for us too, right? Because we have a set price year over year, and we are weathering the volatility of markets together. So there's some stability in that for both parties. But I will say, I think making the case for programs like these requires more creative metrics of success than short-term margins. And I think it requires codifying those metrics. So for us at Simple Mills, we look at a few different things. We are tracking number of acres enrolled in programs like this, number of farmers. We're tracking number of employees that we're able to bring out to farm visits. And we're regularly reporting out on those things internally and externally. And I think that that helps build momentum and a lot of internal pride for the program, and accountability too. But I will say, I think there's no real substitute for just spending time on a farm and seeing healthy soil and talking to a pioneering farmer. So if you can get your CFOs out to some farms and make your pitch there, I think that's the move.
I love that. I love both of those approaches. Luke, I'm curious, from your perspective as a farmer, what systemic changes do you think are necessary to support the broader adoption of multi-year contracts and direct sourcing? How can brands in this room and other supply chain partners play a more supportive role in making farmer-centric models viable? And how can brands support or incentivize farmers to shift away from carbon-intensive farming practices?
Yeah, I feel like there's a chicken or the egg there in that question. How do you get farmers to move away from it? How do you get companies to support the opposite? There is no silver bullet that's going to change things. It's going to be 1 acre, it's going to be 1 ingredient, it's going to be 1 product, 1 consumer making the right choice at the right time. But I think there is a responsibility that the farmer has in giving transparency. And then if he's truly transparent in his practices and what he is doing, he's saying, he's doing what he's saying that he's doing. If the company can relay that to the consumer, maybe that will result in a purchase, you know. I guess like we're always trying to like figure this out at scale, and that's just where I get lost, because I'm back on the farm and I look across the county. I drive to Minneapolis. I fly to California. It is conventional agriculture. I mean, we are trying to fit in, like we're trying to fit into a model that we might not be able to fit into. Like we are going to have to create a completely new one. And I think that's exactly what we're doing, is we're starting small and taking small steps. One thing I could see companies taking is maybe putting more employees in this space. You have a small group of employees in the sustainability sector. And if you look at the challenges that we have ahead of us, you might need to put more people focusing on this so they're not overused and they have time to really understand what it is they're trying to accomplish.
I love that. You know, that last piece too, we often talk about at the collaborative, the opportunity to really bring climate work alive throughout the organization. And I think, Christina, to your point, and I know, Jane, you've also shared this before in our briefing call, the opportunity to bring different folks from cross-departmentally. It also just, again, like really brings this work alive within the organization. And I think you just naturally start to build more allies, which is really critical, especially in times when budgets can get constrained or restricted, to have those other champions that can really see the value and the opportunity of this work. And in our briefing call, we were talking about some opportunities that have emerged kind of beyond improving supply chain resilience. And I'd be curious to hear from you all on kind of some of those unexpected benefits that have emerged from shifting to this way of sourcing. And I'm curious if there's any lessons learned that surprised you. And maybe I'll start with you, Christina.
Sure. Oh gosh, there have been so many benefits in this program. I can't overstate the power, though, of the relationships that we've built. And I have to say, it's not just me and Luke. It's like Luke is on texting basis with like half of our team. So it's a lot of people who bring this program to life. But yeah, I mean, I imagine that a lot of us sustainability professionals are spending a ton of time with data and tracking impact and reporting impact, and that work is super important. But I think that this program has really helped us humanize our climate action work, and it's kind of regrounded us in the fact that we're doing all this work on behalf of real people and real communities, and because we care about public health too. I was remembering that I had the total privilege of seeing Gina McCarthy speak here at Climate Day. I think it was 2018.
Yeah.
And she said something that really stuck with me, and it was so funny. She said something like, I don't do birds or bunnies or polar bears. I'm a people person. And for me, it was this great reminder that we are doing this work because we care about human beings, and we want our communities to have a habitable planet to live on, and we want farmers to keep growing food for us, please. So yeah, I think getting to know families like Luke's through this program have been just such a gift and a huge motivator for us. But there are other perks too, like there's a big innovation benefit for us. So every time we talk to Luke or other farmers in the program, we talk about sunflowers, yes, but we inevitably end up talking about the other things that Luke grows, and I can't keep track anymore of how many things you grow. But it gives us all these ideas for other things we should be experimenting with, and ways that we should be finding delicious homes for these ingredients that farmers want to grow. So there's that source of innovation, inspiration. Our use of things like watermelon seed flour and buckwheat and red beans, butternut squash, all of those things that have become beloved to us really came out of conversations with these farmers in this program. And then the last thing I'll say, I could go on and on about unexpected perks, but internal learning is huge, right? So I think we've been able to bring 20 folks out to Luke's farm of our employees. And Luke has come to speak to our entire company before about all things soil health, biodiversity, agriculture in general. And that internal learning, that investment in employee learning and development is tremendously valuable too.
I love that. Jane, what about for you?
Yeah, well, to state the obvious, or the obvious realization for us is when workers are well cared for, that shows up in the quality and safety of the fruit and vegetables that we're buying. So that's as obvious as it is, but like a number one learning from this. Additionally, I've been pleasantly surprised by the potential upside for cross-functional interests as well. An example was last year when we sat down and approached, one of the suppliers we partner with through the EFI on, and we approached them, to just have a strategic conversation. Can we get creative with varieties or shipping mechanisms or contracts? And without missing a beat, their leadership said, yes, we want to work with you. One, because we believe in the brand, and two, because you're paying the premiums. And to me, that was just such a signal or a reminder that our investment in something like their EFI program was a signal to them that we were invested in them as a business and as a key strategic partner. And now we're at the table kind of in a renewed way, which hopefully is advantageous, to our procurement team and our ops team as well. And lastly, kind of similar to what Christina was speaking about, the employee engagement opportunities are really not to be overlooked. At least at O-Farm, but I'm sure in so many other places, there's just such a deep yearning to feel connected to the people and plants behind the ingredients that go into our products. And most of us at O-Farm are behind a laptop most of the day. And just shy of being able to take all 130 of us out to an orchard, which frankly wouldn't make for a very intimate experience anyway if we did that. We started hosting quarterly virtual Know Your Farmer events where we bring in farmers and farm workers, really trying to gear folks with different expertise, at the farm level, to share photos and videos and kind of walk the company through what the season looks like, what their role looks like, and to build a reciprocal relationship and kind of start to build relationships outside of the traditional sales procurement. And that kind of employee engagement, you can track it to culture and retention, of course, but it also, I think, really helps deepen and solidify mission and purpose, which is crucial, as people go off into their own cross-functional roles.
I love that. Luke, what about for you?
I hate this question because I always get emotional. But it's like the winter time and you get to focus on all the cool things you got to do all last summer and the cool things you got to do next summer. But it's a sense of purpose. Anyway, I cannot describe to you the feeling that you get. God, I do this every time. It's ridiculous. Anyway, but it's I think like farmers, you're kind of alone a lot. So you get recognized and you get to talk to different people and you get to show them what you've done and why you've done it. And it's just having a sense of community, being around people that think the way you do. And it's like a whole lots of different things. Like I can be creative and I'm really busy, but I'm really busy doing things that make sense. I'm not just a number and I'm just dumping my grain in a hole in town and it gets put on a train and I don't get to see it again. Like I grow food, I grow ingredients. And when I get to, go pick a box of Simple Mills crackers off the shelf or something, I can throw it at my boy, like, hey, like we did that, like we're involved with that, and that's really cool. So.
I love that. I think we're getting close to, we've got about 12 minutes left before Q&A. So maybe for this next question, we could be maybe give shorter responses, but, I'm really curious to lean a little bit more into how can companies strategically invest in farmers to ensure long-term economic and climate resilience? And I know we've talked a little bit about this, but perhaps to lean in a little bit more, what types of investments are most impactful in enabling farmers to transition away from carbon-intensive practices? And Jane, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. I'm so glad that you're asking this question. It's an important one, and it also makes me really appreciative that you're joining us, Luke, and to Simple Mills for inviting your partner, Luke, here, because your perspective is really important. And I think to answer this question, we really have to have our ear to the ground and be listening to what farmers and farm workers are telling us they need. That lived experience should really drive this work. And representation at the metaphorical table around strategic planning and decision-making is imperative. It's no secret that often in CPG spaces, that representation is lacking. And I thought, in effort to, since I am not a farm worker myself, in effort to bring some of those experiences that I am learning about to you, I wanted to just share very quickly about a survey that a nonprofit we partner with, Semillero de Ideas, conducted last year. They surveyed 211 farm workers in Washington state about how climate change is impacting them. To our knowledge, this is the only survey of its kind, actually interviewing farm workers about climate change impacts, so hoping to build on this a lot in the coming years. Of those surveyed, 211 folks, 70% said that they are making adaptations in their day-to-day life on the job, 70%. And of those, the number one response, 58%, the adaptation was clothing adaptations in day-to-day job. In the response to often it was heat, drought, smoke were the top three. And I share this as a reminder that yes, we need large-scale, big investments in systems change. And also let us not forget that there are real imminent needs right now that are often pretty low-tech that shouldn't be overlooked. And when I think about clothing, it kind of goes back to like when workers are working out for the quality of the fruit goes up. And I think of all the investment in sportswear, to help you go faster or not injure yourself. And similarly, like harvest can be more efficient if, folks have the type of apparel that they need. So I just offer that very small, very specific example as a reminder of who we should be listening to, who should be at the table, and not to overlook the immediate needs in climate adaptation.
I love that. Thank you for highlighting that. What about for you, Luke?
Got lost in thought there for a second.
What types of investments are most impactful, do you think, from a farmer's perspective, to help enable farmers to transition away from carbon-intensive practices?
I think it's just the main one for me would be that we have to look beyond our generation. We have to look forward to our kids or even their kids as kids. But I think that if you look at the farm as an investment versus just a way to extract from, it makes it a lot easier to do practices that are going to take care of it. So.
Yeah, I think there's so many important investments that we could all be making, but I think foundationally, our time is a really important investment. So just the time that we're taking to really understand the specific needs and goals of a given farmer network. So I imagine that all the companies that are represented here today have unique core competencies that could probably help advance the farmers' goals. For us at Simple Mills, that looks like a big part of our mission and our innovation strategy is seeking out underrepresented ingredients in agriculture that are really nutrient dense and finding homes for them. So when we talk to farmers and we ask them, what do you want to grow? What would really round out your rotation? That's where we can kind of meet in the middle, and we're creating these hopefully delicious products with really interesting ingredients and helping kind of round out a crop rotation. But yeah, I think generally it's good practice to spend time understanding your unique grower network and their context, and then matching that up with a company's core capabilities and finding the places where those two things overlap.
Yeah.
I'd like to add too that from a farmer's perspective, no market, no mission. So if there's no market for us, then we just can't participate. So I think that's really important too. So if we can build these markets and let farmers have access to them, that's kind of where it starts.
Yeah, and perhaps to build off of that, and we'd love to start with you, Luke. What advice would you give companies in the audience, especially those that may feel they lack the scale to establish direct sourcing relationships? What alternative approaches might they be able to take to help advance regen ag and support farmers in a meaningful way?
Yeah, well, I've worked with all different sizes of companies, from small mills and bakeries to small CPG companies, all the way up to like simple mills and Patagonia and things like that. But at a small scale, you may have the time or to go visit farms and start educating yourself that way. But I think just don't get lost in it and just go do the next best thing.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Christina?
For advice?
Oh, yep. For companies that might think, really for any size companies, around the opportunity to establish direct sourcing relationships.
Yeah, I think I'd say don't underestimate the power of sending a signal. I know for most of us, we aren't able to like totally upend a supply chain overnight. But you know, if you start asking your suppliers questions about the growing conditions in your supply chain, or you start asking for better visibility to growers or the ability to develop relationships with those growers, I think that sends a really important message that we expect to have that traceability and transparency, and we want to build those connections to the people and places growing our ingredients.
I love that. It's kind of like, we talk about signaling a lot too. If no one asks, then it's kind of like, well, then no one cares. So at a minimum, asking the questions. Yeah, if you are with a brand or company and you feel like scale is not on your side to be influential, one, I think this is where, I got two like not very exciting answers, but one, this is where I think certifications can play a really helpful role. Or like our least worst tool available to us, and I can use organic as one example, or regenerative organic as a certification example, and ask yourself, are any of the ingredients that we're sourcing certified organic? If they are we celebrating that? If they're not, could some of them be? Because we know that organic practices prevent toxic and persistent pesticides from entering our soil and waterways and build soil health. And knowing that there is a marketplace built around organic that brands of any size can access. And that sends a market signal too. And second, to your point, Christina, I think just continuing to learn more about your supply chain. It's not the sexy work, but it's like really laying a strong foundation, building relationships, in addition to the traditional sales and procurement relationships. I think of it as like peeling back layers, and the opportunities will present themselves.
I love that. Reciprocal relationships, communication, transparency. I love the themes that are coming up so far. I think we are ready to turn to audience Q&A. And there should be some folks, I think, that will be running around with mics. I see that they're getting their mics right now. So if you just want to raise your hand, then we can have someone walk around and find you to ask your question. Perfect. We've got some folks in the middle right here.
Hi, I just want to say that this was an amazing panel and just my first one, and I'm just really, really excited to be here. My question, I think, is mainly for Luke and Christina, but how did you decide which practice to start with? Like, you talked about cover cropping, and how did you come to that as a start?
Well, so cover cropping is one of many. When I went from conventional to organic to regenerative, and maybe it was before our relationship that I was doing these things, but I was doing them on my own, and that wasn't a long-term strategy for success. So thank God I've built relationships along the way. And but for me personally on the farm, it started with soil health equals human health. That was my ultimate goal. And I think we started with diverse crop rotation first. Next we went to cover crop. Next we went to no fall tillage. Next we went to integrating livestock. And before all of that, we eliminated synthetic fertilizers and chemical. It was a very long, well, not long, but I mean it's a road that started a long time ago that we're gradually just building on. So, and if you think about in terms of farming, right? Like we're going to eliminate tillage. Well, that's farming. We're going to eliminate chemical. Well, that's farming. We're going to eliminate synthetic fertilizer. Well, that's farming. We're going to get rid of the fancy GMO seeds. Well, that's farming. We're going to, build our diversity. Well, now we're getting out of being efficient, and like we're not doing any of the things that I grew up seeing as farming. So I don't even know what you call what we're doing now, but we're just going to keep going.
Thank you.
Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Also a question for Farmer Luke. From one farmer to another, I can imagine that going from conventional to organic to regenerative to now what you do, which is magic, is a daunting task. What piece of it, like simple, if you will, knowing that it's not always easy advice, would you give to another farmer?
You have to have that purpose piece. If you don't have that, forget it, because you're not going to be sleeping on your tractor floor. You're not going to have failures year after year. And just want to keep doing it. Eventually you will get tired of it. But have a purpose, understand why you're doing it, and then get a community of people around you to support you.
I got a question for Christina. So you mentioned that your system has a really heavy emphasis on continuous improvement and feedback and so forth. I'm wondering if you could speak to some of the changes you've had to make and some of the improvements based on that feedback in your system that have come about.
Yeah, great question. One small one I'll mention is that we used to call that per acre reimbursement an incentive, and we're trying to stop using that word because of what I mentioned earlier, that these farmers need no incentive. They already really want to use these practices, so it's really about partnering to make that more attainable. But the multi-year contract element that we just started this last year, that really came out of those conversations. And our team that runs this program asks for survey feedback every year. We were hearing from multiple farmers over and over again, like multi-year contract is the thing that would make this differential, even more than we were hearing about a higher price. So that stability year over year seemed like it was a no-brainer for both parties, honestly.
Hello, Andrew LaTurngel. Luke, you said no market, no mission. And then Christina, you talked about a sunflower partnership and talked about this crop rotation. I've been trying to build this at my company, but the issue is we're only buying a single crop. And so that crop's part of a rotation. So the practices are plot and farm based, but I'm only buying, one of three crops that are in that rotation, and then next year that crop's going to be in another plot, and the next year on another plot. So effectively, I'm trying to incentivize a change in practices that's got to go on multiple plots and multiple crops, but I'm only buying a small share of the total. So, Luke. How have you dealt with that, especially with your market question, market comment? And I'm thinking back to when you first started. And then Christina, how'd you deal with this in sunflower? I'm not sure if you're buying the other parts of the rotation. And Jane, I'd ask you a question, but I'm not sure exactly a practical example, so I don't have a question for you.
So I started without having a clear path on where I was heading. I threw my third crop into the rotation, which was wheat. That year, we got involved with a lot of stuff. We met a group of people that led me to a market that needed wheat. The next year, I just seen, well, what's the next best thing that I could plant in my rotation? And it just kept building that way, just organically. Where I'm at now is I try to be, don't get hung up on the idea that you have to grow the rotation. That's not your job. Your job is to have a relationship with farmers. You're not the only ingredient buyer out there. There's other there's other buyers the farmers can go to build that system that works for them. It's hard enough with our geographical location on the farm to figure out what I should grow, when I should grow it, and how long it should be in the rotation, and which farm it should be on, and those things. It's just not a space that I don't think buyers need to be in. They need to just be conscious about what ingredients work well for them, and then whether or not they have a direct consumer or a direct partnership with the farm that is growing it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I would just say, of course, not all companies are going to be able to create a market for all of the ingredients in a rotation as large as someone like Luke's. However, to Luke's point, there are probably other brands that buy the other crops in the rotation. And for us at Simple Mills, it's been really fun to get to know the other brands who partner with Luke. So we've made friends with Love Lil Bucks and Patagonia Provisions. We only are buying sunflower from Luke, but we know that we're part of an ecosystem of brands that are buying other things. So we all play a different role in that system. And I think that's probably true of some of the fields where you're pulling sunflower from.
Hello, my name is Shauna. I'm with CCOF. My question's for you, Jane. You mentioned the Know Your Farmer events because you can't fly 130 people out to the farm. Are those virtual events that you're hosting just for staff, or is that something that you open out to the consumer and make it a more public opportunity to engage your audience with the farmers that are growing your food?
Thank you, Shauna. That's a great question. So far, last year, it's just been for internal O-Farm, but I love the idea of being able to extend that bridge of connection even more broadly. So thank you for the suggestion. Love it.
Hi, I'm Justine. I'm representing a purpose-driven retailer, and I'm here at the show. And I think your comment about ecosystems sparked my question. How do you grow this ecosystem that you're creating here and perpetuate it? Thinking about Luke, the way you described, your small little space in a sea of conventional growers across the country, and trying to work outside of that system and how inefficient it is. But it seems like you are all creating something that's really a solution for that. And so how do you grow that ecosystem, and how can retailers support that?
Yeah, well, I think, to be very honest, this program is deep and narrow for us at Simple Mills. It's not the biggest acreage impact or number of farmers enrolled compared to some of our other programs. But what we always say is that we hope we're helping create a blueprint for something that others could learn from, both the successes and the foibles. So yeah, I think just starting even on a pilot scale to show a model and have others learn from that is a starting point. But I think it comes back to this foundational idea of just having conversations throughout the supply chain. So certainly at Simple Mills, we're very excited to have our retailers come out to farms like Luke's. We're actually doing that later this year. So if you're a retailer and you have brands that are focused on this work, it might be worth asking if you could go out to one of the farms that they're working with.
And when I'm just picturing my product move throughout the supply chain and then it gets on the shelf or not, I just think the retailers really hold the key to success here, because they can strategically put things in certain places that have a better chance of selling, or just having advertisements in the store maybe, where that'd be another place to showcase companies that are working towards similar goals that you are.
Jane, is there anything that you want to touch on related to this question?
Yeah, I would love to. It's a great question. Thank you, and I appreciate those insights. I have my curiosity is around produce specifically, but I'd be super curious if you all experience something similar in a different category. It's been really interesting to learn that in the fresh produce set, there's a high level of fluency, I think, around social and environmental, considerations and benchmarks and what's out there and prioritizing. But then the second that produce gets, pureed or powdered or put into a pouch or a bar, it's almost like an entirely different world. There we talk about packaging, which is appropriate and makes sense, but it's almost totally forgotten. And when we are selling into we sell into different sets, in the retailers, but so we're often not working with the fresh produce buyer. We're working either with the baby buyer or in the dairy set or what have you. And I'm just noticing there's just seems to be a huge disconnect. And so when I want to speak about the work we're doing in the fields and orchards, I know it would land really well with fresh produce, but it doesn't always land in the other categories. And so I think just continuing to build fluency across the categories, I just think there's so much possibility with that.
I love that. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Becky Spradley. I run the Sustainable Agriculture Program at Amway, and my question is for Jane or maybe Christina. Would you mind sharing, and I really appreciate your transparency so far, how large your team is to be doing this work with your partner growers? And then when you do have a lot of ingredients, like you mentioned, Jane, how do you prioritize which growers you visit in person yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Just for a little more, I think I mentioned earlier, but Once Upon a Farm is a team. We're roughly 130, give or take, total. Our sustainability function is me, and I have a full-time colleague, and we have a couple interns. But we are, and it sounds cliche to say, a very cross-functional team. And we've worked really hard to really position ourselves as a resource to other functions of the business. So we work very closely with procurement and ops and marketing and quality. So I share that as we are a small team, which is no surprise, but we are very closely connected with other departments. And in terms of how we prioritize who we're going to visit, I really apply a lens of materiality. So certainly those from whom we are buying significant volumes from, absolutely. Those who are prospective, where we are seeking to build supplier relationships, absolutely, even before we've maybe even purchased the first, item, first crop. And of course, in materiality, I would say anything high risk too, is how I sort of address that prioritization.
I'll just add that very similar on the kind of team structure front. So we have 3 full-time people on our sustainability and mission team, but like Jane's team, we're working really closely with the procurement team, and they actually lead our direct trade program, and we're supporting them on that. So they are our heroes of making this program work and figuring out the supply chain. So yeah, it's absolutely cross-functional. And in terms of visiting farms, I would say sometimes we don't always have the ability to perfectly decide which farms we want to go to. It depends on who we have relationships with. So certainly in a program like this, where we have strong personal relationships, we are keen to get out to every one of those farms. But in full transparency, it can be a little bit harder with some of our other crops where the supply chains aren't quite as traceable and transparent.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, I don't think we have any more time for Q&A, but there's obviously a lot of appetite and interest in what you all have been sharing in this topic more broadly, so really appreciate, before I officially close it out though, maybe in 30 seconds, if you could all just share one key action or mindset shift you hope companies take away from this conversation, and maybe we'll just start with you, Jane, and go down the row.
Sure. Yeah, I hope we take away not to forget the human and relational component of climate action work. I fundamentally believe that the climate crisis is the result of extractive relationships. Extractive relationships to natural resources like water and soil, but also extractive relationships with people. And I just really believe if we cannot right those relationships, then we cannot drive the meaningful systems change that is required of us.
I would just leave you with small steps, just one small step at a time.
Love that. I agree with both of those. So incrementalism is a big one we talk about at Simple Mills. But I would also just say, to echo Jane, like really find ways to humanize your work on climate. I think it makes it way more fun and way more motivating, and it will probably bring new insights to your business.
I love it. Well, please give me a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much to Jane, Luke, and Christina for sharing your insights with our community this morning. We're going to take a quick 15-minute break, but we'll start back up in this room at 12:15 for leveraging and building Scope 3 value chain partnerships with Oatly, UNFI, and Supplier Locked. In Grand Ballroom E, we're featuring a session on emerging opportunities in food waste featuring Refed, Carry, and Sodexo. So we'll see you back up in here or over there at 10:15. Thanks.
Got a taste of freedom, and it feels so fine. There's no worries, just a good, good time. Gotta love this freedom, yeah, it feels so fine. There's no more worries in the sunshine. I feel so good, I feel so free. It's a brand new me, it's a brand new me. I feel so good, I feel so free. It's a brand new me, it's a brand new me.
Expo West 2025 is bringing new and exciting events to Anaheim this year. Check out these top 5 new things you don't want to miss out on. Kick off your Expo West experience at the Expo West Block Party. Join us for live music, amazing food, and a chance to connect with new faces and friends. buyers, we're extending our buyers-only hours to give you an exclusive early peek at the show floor. Recharge and fuel up at the Newtopia Now Thrive Cafe pop-up in the New Hope Network Cafe. We're introducing 2 brand new pavilions for you to explore. Check out the Conscious Beauty Pavilion in Hall C and the Wellness Beverage Pavilion in Hall D. Join us at Community Brunch on Thursday morning, a free brunch open to all attendees and exhibitors. Head over to expowest.com for the full agenda. See you there.
What, the where, and the why of the dietary supplements industry, especially from a data perspective. That's what we do. What's selling from ingredient categories and individual ingredients? Where is it selling? That's our channel data. And why is it selling? Meaning, what conditions are motivating that purchase for consumers?
As you can see, right, this is about a $77.4 billion industry. In 2024 is what we're estimating it to be, and it's going to be adding about 33 billion between 2023 and 2027. So quite a significant amount.
Looking at the weight management category, I think that some of the promising ingredients would be what I would say is the fiber and prebiotic piece, just kind of addressing, you know, the gut health side of weight management. In some of these different, you know, products. But Rick, do you have any thoughts on ingredients?
Well, I think there's a different kind of attention being paid to this than was paid in the past, before we had some, you know, thermogenic stuff and some appetite suppressants that, you know, of questionable efficacy. But I think, as I said before, the conversation moving it over to blood sugar was a big shift. And that is a place where there's, you know, we have some science.
And then I'll end here with the last consumer piece, just showing, you know, which formats that respondents are currently taking their dietary supplement products in. So tablet and capsule are going to be those top 2 formats. And then powder is third, which is interesting because in recent surveys that we've done last year, so in 2023, normally we saw gummy actually in front of powder, but now we're starting to see that shift of powder is actually going to be in front of gummy.
Do we know if organic matters to these consumers across categories and specifically outside of food and beverage?
Yeah, so within supplements also, it was still significantly higher than any other certification. So we did non-GMO as well, you know, gluten-free, GMP certified, NSF certified, for those supplement-specific products, and organic was still just by far much higher.
Got a taste of freedom, and it feels so fine. There's no worries.
Expo West 2025 is bringing new and exciting events to Anaheim this year. Check out these top 5 new things you don't want to miss out on. Kick off your Expo West experience at the Expo West Block Party. Join us for live music, amazing food, and a chance to connect with new faces and friends. Buyers, we're extending our buyers-only hours to give you an exclusive early peek at the show floor. Recharge and fuel up at the Newtopia Now Thrive Cafe pop-up in the New Hope Network Cafe. We're introducing 2 brand new pavilions for you to explore. Check out the Conscious Beauty Pavilion in Hall C and the Wellness Beverage Pavilion in Hall D. Join us at Community Brunch on Thursday morning, a free brunch open to all attendees and exhibitors. Head over to expowest.com for the full agenda. See you there.
What, the where, and the why of the dietary supplements industry, especially from a data perspective. That's what we do. What's selling from ingredient categories and individual ingredients. Where is it selling? That's our channel data. And why is it selling? Meaning, what conditions are motivating that purchase for consumers?
As you can see, right, this is about a $77.4 billion industry. In 2024 is what we're estimating it to be, and it's going to be adding about 33 billion between 2023 and 2027. So quite a significant amount.
Looking at the weight management category, I think that some of the promising ingredients would be what I would say is the fiber and prebiotic piece, just kind of addressing, you know, the gut health side of weight management. In some of these different, products. But Rick, do you have any thoughts on ingredients?
Well, I think there's a different kind of attention being paid to this than was paid in the past. Before we had some, thermogenic stuff and some appetite suppressants that, of questionable efficacy. But I think, as I said before, the conversation moving it over to blood sugar was a big shift. And that is a place where there's, we have some science.
And then I'll end here with the last consumer piece, just showing, which formats that respondents are currently taking their dietary supplement products in. So tablet and capsule are going to be those top 2 formats. And then powder is third, which is interesting because in recent surveys that we've done last year, so in 2023, normally we saw gummy actually in front of powder, but now we're starting to see that shift of powder is actually going to be in front of gummy.
Do we know if organic matters to these consumers across categories and specifically outside of food and beverage?
Yeah, so within supplements also, it was still significantly higher than any other certification. So we did non-GMO as well, gluten-free, GMP certified, NSF certified, for those supplement specific products, and organic was still just by far much higher.
Got a taste of freedom, and it feels so fine. There's no worries.
Expo West 2025 is bringing new and exciting events to Anaheim this year. Check out these top 5 new things you don't want to miss out on. Kick off your Expo West experience at the Expo West Block Party. Join us for live music, amazing food, and a chance to connect with new faces and friends. Buyers, we're extending our buyers-only hours to give you an exclusive early peek at the show floor. Recharge and fuel up at the Newtopia Now Thrive Cafe pop-up in the New Hope Network Cafe. We're introducing 2 brand new pavilions for you to explore. Check out the Conscious Beauty Pavilion in Hall C and the Wellness Beverage Pavilion in Hall D. Join us at Community Brunch on Thursday morning, a free brunch open to all attendees and exhibitors. Head over to expowest.com for the full agenda. See you there.
What, the where, and the why of the dietary supplements industry, especially from a data perspective. That's what we do. What's selling from ingredient categories and individual ingredients. Where is it selling? That's our channel data. And why is it selling? Meaning, what conditions are motivating that purchase for consumers?
As you can see, right, this is about a $77.4 billion industry. In 2024 is what we're estimating it to be, and it's going to be adding about 33 billion between 2023 and 2027. So quite a significant amount.
Looking at the weight management category, I think that some of the promising ingredients would be what I would say is the fiber and prebiotic piece, just kind of addressing, you know, the gut health side of weight management in some of these different, you know, products. But Rick, do you have any thoughts on ingredients?
Well, I think there's a different kind of attention being paid to this than was paid in the past, before we had some, you know,
Hi, everybody. I hope you were able to get some refreshments during the break. I'd like to welcome you back. One thing I wanted to note, which I did not mention this morning, is that if you're looking to understand the flow of Climate Day, we do have printed agendas back at the Climate Collaborative table there, and those are quite helpful, and they actually share who's in the resource fair, what the flow of the day is, all of the speakers, so I highly recommend grabbing one of those. For those of you who just joined us, I'm Courtney Pineau. I'm the Executive Director at the Climate Collaborative, and thank you for being here with us. So today's session will run for 1 hour. We'll have plenty of time for audience Q&A. Please note that we are recording these sessions, so the sessions in this main ballroom will actually be live on YouTube, so there's something you can actually access in the future or share with colleagues who may not be here as well. So I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator for our next session. Katie Clark is a Climate Collaborative board member and a driven sustainability leader with 15 years of experience in purpose-led food businesses. Katie is currently the Senior Environmental Sustainability Manager at Chobani, America's #1 yoga brand, with a mission of making natural and nutritious food accessible to more people. Prior to Chobani, Katie led the sustainability program at Happy Family Baby Organics for 7 years, the #1 organic baby food in the US at that time. In her role as Director of Sustainability, she spearheaded the launch of a new line of baby products made with regenerative and organic ingredients and enabled the company to set a public-facing net zero by 2030 commitment, among several other notable achievements. Katie holds an MBA in Sustainable Business from the University of Oregon and a BA in International Development and Sociology from the University of California, Berkeley. With that, I would like to welcome our panelists to the stage. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really great discussion in store, and I'm just going to do a little bit of context setting before I introduce our awesome panelists for today. So, Scope 3 reductions is essential for companies, yet many struggle with where to start. How do you build a credible program? What incentives drive meaningful reductions? What existing programs can companies leverage? In today's session, we'll tackle these key questions to help you navigate and enhance your Scope 3 engagement. We have a really interesting set of panelists today. We have a unique group of folks with representation from a distributor, a brand who is both a supplier of the distributor and who has suppliers of their own, and an organization working with suppliers to reduce, oops, where did my notes go? It's the problem with notes that look like this. Oh goodness, where did they go? Reduce downstream suppliers' emissions. It's going to be a great discussion, so I'm going to introduce our panelists to start. So first we have Benjamin Bartley. He's the Director Responsible Procurement at United Natural Foods, Inc., the largest publicly traded distributor in North America. His remit includes UNFI's science-based target to reduce their supply chain emissions. Benjamin's career in value-based food systems includes verification of corporate climate action, development of regenerative agriculture insetting projects, value chain coordination at a member-owned food co-op, and directing a food access social enterprise. Benjamin has an MBA from Drexel University, a master's in ecosystem management and administration from Penn State, and lives in Philadelphia with his wife and daughter. At the very end here, we have Dr. Julie Kunin, who is co-lead of global sustainability at Oatly. In this capacity, she leads design and execution of the company's initiatives on regenerative agriculture and development of nature-based commitments and programming. Her passion for sustainability began with a PhD in archaeology, focused on indigenous agricultural practices. Dr. Kunin went on to hold roles in academia, government, USAID, nonprofit, Wildlife Conservation Society, freelance journalism, and business consulting before joining Oatly at the end of 2020. Dr. Kunin is also a writer on topics at the nexus of food, culture, and the environment for independent media outlets. She has been an awards judge for the James Beard Foundation, a fellow of the Explorers Club, and currently serves as a member of the board of directors of Food Tank and an advisor to the Culinary Institute of America for their master's program in sustainable food systems. In the middle here, we have Vincent Hoon, who brings extensive experience in the field of sustainability, climate, energy, regulations, and is a co-founder of Supplier Locked, a climate school providing suppliers the skills to progress through their climate journey, helping achieve their Scope 3 supply chain goals. As a director at Guidehouse, Vincent leads the sustainability disclosure and strategy themes and supports clients from strategy development to program implementation. His sector experience includes the food, beverage, pharmaceutical, life sciences, logistics, packaging, energy, and technology space. So really, really experienced and fascinating group of folks we have up here today. So I'd actually like to start with you, Vincent, for a little bit of context setting. So Scope 3 engagement is often one of the most challenging, yet one of the most impactful areas for corporate climate action. Could you just tell us a little bit about Supplier Locked and share your perspective on the imperative of Scope 3 engagement, especially in today's environment in the context of the US government's weakening stance on climate?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what was interesting was 2019, we didn't know that COVID was about to start, and we were working with a lot of companies on their target setting, so developing science-based targets, different types of targets, and a lot of those targets included Scope 3. So what we did is we performed a lot of maturity assessments of their, basically the climate programs of their suppliers. And time after time we were seeing that there was not a lot of maturity. We had a working session with companies including McCormick, PepsiCo, Mars, couple of other large corporations, and in the supply chain, we were seeing that there was huge potential for ultimately helping suppliers to establish a more advanced climate program. So that was kind of the moment in 2019 when Supplier Locked was born, and ultimately it's a program where you can see it as a climate school or accelerator where step by step we help suppliers to establish their climate program. So it's Scope 1 and 2 footprinting, Scope 3 footprinting, setting a target, developing an abatement program where we also very specifically look at agricultural related emissions, and then also how to share data with customers. So that was kind of that's the background of Supplier Locked. I'll share some more insights on program design later. And then I think there's a lot of relevance of the Scope 3 topic. We we see that a lot of companies that have established a target, that those targets are starting to expire. That can be 2028, can be 2030, a little bit later. But those companies increasingly look at their suppliers to achieve their Scope 3 value chain target, to basically drive the progress that they need to achieve their Scope 3 goal. And I mean, you're just asking this question so much going through my head, but a couple of other reasons why I think this will stay important is there was a recent publication in ESG today about CFOs, and 500 CFOs were interviewed on if they think sustainability and sustainability programs will stay important within their organization. And they said yes, more than 70%. And what was interesting is that they talk about benefits. So it included ultimately more revenue and sales. I imagine that also has to do with those customer dynamics, that if you have a program in place, it increasingly enables a better relationship with your customers that value sustainability. But they also mentioned risk management, and that in a way relates to that there are policies in place in certain markets like Europe, here in California. So I keep seeing those as major drivers ultimately for the relevance for Scope 3 as well.
Yeah. That's great, thank you. And we heard a lot about risk management on the previous panel as well. I think that's going to be a theme throughout the day. So you spoke about customers and their interest in sustainability. Benjamin, I want to turn to you next. UNFI plays a unique role at the intersection of the food system, connecting suppliers and retailers. And you've been working on ways to engage suppliers to reduce their emissions. Can you share a little bit more specifically about the Climate Action Partnership and its approach, and how can companies join if they're interested? Just yell.
Yeah, I'll speak loudly. Yeah, UNFI, as you said, we play a unique role in that we're a distributor and essentially a key link between our network of 30,000 suppliers and our 10,000 suppliers. Thank you. Does this work?
In a second.
We're also one of the few distributors with a validated science-based target. So it is very important for us to be engaging our network of suppliers on our shared value chain emissions. So to that end, yeah, several years ago we launched the UNFI Climate Action Hub and the Climate Action Partnership Programs. This is in essence how we provide resources and rewards to our suppliers to both, help them on their journey wherever they may be on their climate journey, but also to reward and promote those who are doing the work to decarbonize. So on the resources side, our Climate Action Hub website hosts a number of resources. We have a climate action guide for businesses, several series of webinars that delved into a number of topics like measurement, setting a target, implementing the activities in your plan, and ultimately disclosing them, where we're bringing in practitioners, industry experts. And we also have commissioned case studies, in partnership with the Climate Collaborative and some of our leading suppliers who are doing innovative work on one of these topics. Also on the website, one that we published recently was with Organic Valley and their in-setting program, where they're in essence working with their member owners to implement practices on farm to reduce emissions. So sharing best practices, lessons learned from that. Those are on the resources side. On the rewards side, the Climate Action Partnership Program is where we recognize and promote the suppliers who are doing that work. So recognition, on our website, social media. If you are at a UNFI selling show, we can promote that at your booth. We have a climate action display case that we'll provide for free on rotation to CAP suppliers, Climate Action Partner suppliers. And then free monthly ads in a monthly specials publication to our natural customers, for instance, where our designers work with brands to help you tell your story around your decarbonizing to our shared customers. 20% of which by sales are retailers who have their own Scope 3 targets. So, our role in that supply chain, as you led with, we're trying to create that throughput between our suppliers doing the work and the customers who are seeking these lower carbon products. To join the program, you need to be a UNFI supplier, and you need to have a registered commitment with one of a number of recognized frameworks. So Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, that's who we have our target with. The Climate Collaborative has a number of relevant target areas for commitments. The Small Medium Enterprise or SME Climate Hub, since we work with a lot of emerging brands. ClimeCo, Climate Neutral certification. And most recently, we added the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, thanks to Oatly bringing it to our attention. But in essence, if you have a commitment or a certification through one of those and are in good standing, we have a consent form, make it official, and then we can begin activating some of those benefits.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, and I love this example of 2 organizations so far who are really facilitating movement on Scope 3. And I want to turn to you, Julie, because Oatly sits in a unique position where you're both a supplier to UNFI, and of course you have your own suppliers. You represent Scope 3 emissions for retailers, and you have suppliers who represent your own Scope 3 emissions. So how does Oatly think about value chain partnerships in both directions?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We work in both of those spaces, so I'll take the sort of us being upstream for customers like UNFI and other retailers. Like many companies in this room, we're a company with a mission-driven purpose. Our purpose is to transform the food system into one that benefits both people and planet. And we think about it as that mission helps our customers meet their Scope 3 requirements and commitments. And how does that work? Most recently, Oatly's products were recognized through the initiative that Benjamin just mentioned, the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, as climate solutions, capital C, capital S. These are products that are recognized as replacing higher emission sort of legacy products in the marketplace with lower carbon alternatives. They're products that are essential for decarbonizing our food system and for reaching societal net zero. So what we have found is that most of the mainstream greenhouse gas accounting frameworks don't really account for this potential pathway. They're generally designed for legacy companies that are doing the job of making their footprint less bad, right? And they're not necessarily designed for companies like us that are growing and are providing, doing more good in the world, if you want to say it like that. Growing as a company and working to convert customers to these lower carbon alternatives. But we need more of these, right, to transform the food system. Climate solutions and the companies that produce them need to scale rapidly. So we began working with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. They have developed a formal framework called the Climate Solutions Framework. It has a set of rigorous criteria, and I won't get into the details here, but just among them to say that your product has to be at least 50% less intensive than the category average of what it is competing against. So for us, that would be the milk space, both dairy and plant. And as that moves to decarbonize over time, we will also have to track that. There are other requirements, and if somebody has questions about that, I'm happy to talk about those. But we're really thrilled that key customers like UNFI, and they're really in the vanguard on this, are starting to accept the Climate Solutions Framework, the work of ERI, as an accepted framework under which we can achieve membership in climate action programs like UNFI's. We're really proud that we just joined that program. And part of what we're doing now is really working to grow awareness that these other frameworks exist and really calling for recognition that companies like us need to be supported on their growth journey and should be recognized for the work that we're doing, bringing climate solutions into the sphere. So that's sort of how we're approaching that piece of it. And then I know we'll have some time. Obviously, as a responsible company, we also attend to our own upstream Scope 3, and I think at another moment in this panel, I can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I think we're going to turn some of the questions to focusing on how do you engage your upstream suppliers and how are each of these organizations supporting companies and organizations in doing that. So Vincent, based on your experience in Supplier Locked, what are the hallmarks of a successful Scope 3 engagement program? And if a company here is considering launching its own initiative, what are the key kind of design principles that they should prioritize in order to be successful?
Yeah, and we think about this a lot within Supplier Locked and also at Guidehouse when we work with many companies on designing programs. I have a very long list, but I would say the combination of clear criteria and communications with suppliers combined with the right level of support goes a very long way. So when we design programs, there's a longer list that you could, for success factors, you could think about. So there are elements like how do you communicate with suppliers, how do you collaborate with them, which incentives could you put in place, which criteria are would resonate with your suppliers, and also monitoring and tracking. So how do you track progress? All elements that I would kind of recommend to have in place when you're designing a supplier engagement program. And then I think a deep dive on your supplier base, and that typically we apply the 80-20 rule, your top 100 suppliers, top 300 suppliers for bigger companies, sometimes top 1,000 suppliers, really looking at which suppliers have the highest greenhouse gas related impact on our Scope 3 footprint, often in category 1 and 2, and then also what is the maturity of their programs. We actually found that if, even based on disclosures, if you look at which program elements are in place, might be as simple as, is there a footprint? Is there a target? Is there an abatement program? Do they have an ESG report? Do they disclose to CDP? By tracking a couple of those elements, you're basically able to pretty easily identify if a supplier has a program in place, yes or no, and then combining their maturity of their program and the impact on your Scope 3 footprint can kind of help you to establish almost like personas of suppliers and how to engage with them. And when a supplier is advanced, I would say you can advance and they have a high impact. You could collaborate with them, establish a partnership to really drive down a significant chunk of emissions together, invest together, might be more time investment. And then for a middle group where you could see emissions are important, but not the highest, and the programs are not really advanced, that is where I think you could think about what type of support at scale could be delivered to suppliers. And by going through this design process time and time again, we developed the Supplier Locked initiative to basically take the suppliers by the hand, really collaborate with them to build maturity in their climate program. So those are just a couple of things that come to mind related to that question.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And the theme that I'm hearing throughout is not just asking of something from your suppliers, but providing them with the key resources they needed in order to meet that ask. And I think we're going to continue to hear that as a theme throughout these responses. So Benjamin, from your perspective, where do companies typically get stuck in their Scope 3 reduction efforts? Vincent just laid out a number of great principles for developing a Scope 3 program. What are some of the pitfalls or the pain points that you see, and how is UNFI working to tackle some of those challenges?
I think it depends in part on where you're at in your journey. If you're just starting and the act of measuring and trying to get a sense of what that footprint is not it's not immaterial. So if you think about it on the front end, just establishing a baseline, but also if you're responding to downstream customer requests, if you're disclosing your emissions in an impact report, this is probably not a one-time exercise. It's probably annual and ongoing. So I would say one of the challenges is just the effort involved with doing the measurement, in part because like we're talking about something that's inherently indirect by definition. It's your scope 3. You're probably drawing from a number of data systems with varying quality, but maybe more importantly is this effort in a world where we have finite time could be taking away from your resources and the work of actually planning and implementing the reduction activities. So that's a real challenge that's worth naming. But I'll say too, the importance of measuring is not to be understated. Without doing it in some of the ways Vincent was describing, like you won't know what the hotspots are, where the most material emission sources are, and thus what are the right interventions? What's going to have the most ROI on the expenditures to actually make said reductions? So to the extent that, UNFI is aware of this and trying to support our suppliers to that end, like one, we've been intentional about that with the resources on our Climate Action Hub and bringing in, practitioners who can share their best practices in addressing that. But I'll say there's also a recognition by UNFI for the need that we have to improve our own scope 3, but also the type of support that we extend to our suppliers. So we recently launched a partnership with How Good. They're a technology provider specialized in food and ag. They include sustainability insights, scope 3 among them. And we're excited for this because in part it will allow UNFI's calculation and measurements to be a lot more representative and actionable. But maybe more importantly, it allows us to extend free access to a light version of their platform for folks, again, wherever they're at on their journey. If you've not done the measurement before, you can create a free account. You'll have pre-populated in it those products that we distribute. And with some nominal inputs, you can create custom product carbon footprints, which are typically fairly expensive, but are really important in understanding those hotspots and having more nuanced insights. For UNFI, we think that it's important to bring value back to our suppliers if we're going to be working with them in the ways described. And I know that the Align Sustainability Reporting Initiative is on the agenda later today, so I'll put a plug in for that. I think it's in the afternoon, and I won't speak to it much here, but it's relevant in the sense that UNFI, we're a member of the working group, and I mean the things that I'm hearing from others in that forum definitely resonate in these challenge areas. Like if I'm doing this measuring and reporting, it feels like it's going into a black box, or like I'm not sure what it's in service of. I'm not getting much value back in it. So I say all this, just to kind of reiterate that for UNFI, it was really important for us in choosing a partner and approach to working with our suppliers and around measurement in particular to create a way where we can provide value back to suppliers. So again, enhancing their understanding of their own emissions, but also enabling UNFI to be a better partner and helping to differentiate your products to our shared customers based on those custom product carbon footprints, and to help us get that throughput to our customers who are looking for lower carbon goods.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Julie, I want to turn to you and hear a little bit about your own upstream programs. Oli has developed programs to help their suppliers or farmers reduce their climate emissions. Can you tell us a little bit about how those programs are structured and what results you've seen so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're an oat milk company. Hopefully folks in the room know that. So for us, the vast majority of our scope 3 impact comes in our oat supply chain. And so that is where we focus much of our time. It's the work that I've been doing for the last 4 years or so at the company. We have a pretty aggressive regenerative agriculture sourcing target and have designed an initiative to partner not only with the farmers who produce the oats, but very importantly with the mills. So we don't have a direct sourcing supply chain. We buy our oats, kilned oats from oat mills. And they have become really, really essential partners in the program that we've designed. So it's a bit of like a triangular partnership, and it works very well. The program is designed, of course, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with oat agriculture, It is also designed to support ecosystem health and nature positive outcomes, and has elements also of supporting farmers and farm viability and farmer community resilience. So it's meant to be a pretty holistic program. I think some of the elements of it that I'd call out for the audience is this co-design that I've mentioned. It is different in Canada than it is from Sweden than it will be in some of our other supply sheds. We have gone and spent a lot of time having conversations with our oat mills and the producers who produce for them to make sure that the technical specifications are appropriate to that region. It is, I'll talk about this probably a little bit later. I mean, we pay, obviously, for farmers to participate in it. We pay for practice adoption on an acreage basis. We pay for them to contribute data. We pay for people to contribute their knowledge. I mean, so there's definitely equity in the system. But I also want to just mention, equally important is the work that we've done to develop collaboration and partnership inside the company. And this is often where companies get hung up, is that you have a procurement team who's on a mission to make sure you can get, the goods that you need on the time and at the price that you need them. And then you have sustainability targets. And to be honest, they don't always integrate, especially if you're a larger, sort of a more complex company. So one thing that we spent a lot of time on last year was actually workshopping together with our procurement team on the setting of the targets that Oatly will now have to reach 100% acreage equivalent sourcing volume for our oats. It's on a mass balance measurement scale, but deciding together basically how to roll that out, both in terms of scale in any one supply shed and then over the diversity of the supply sheds that the company sources from. And I think that that's just an equally important piece of work, and I'm highlighting that because I think it doesn't always get talked about, and it's definitely not glamorous. You asked me, I think, a little bit about what we're seeing so far. So this is year 3 of our work in our Canadian supply shed. We'll be at about 5,000 acres, which is roughly, I think, 17% equivalent of our supply, so it's not an insignificant number. I'm also really just pleased to share that we're doing year 1 in Sweden this year, so we're launching it this year with our mill partner in Sweden, so that's an exciting milestone. And then Benjamin mentioned working with data providers, in his case, How Good. We have 2 really great technology support partners, one here for our North American work, that's Regrow, they're probably in the room, another company that we work with in Sweden, Improven. And this year, for the first time, both of those technology and data providers have enabled us to have customized emissions factors for our supply sheds that we're using in our greenhouse gas accounting. It's been 4 years in the making, and that's a pretty big milestone. So those are some of the highlights I would share.
That's huge, and I think a lot of companies are looking for that really detailed data, and so to hear that you've been able to achieve that with those partners is really encouraging.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about incentives and what incentives you've seen work effectively for suppliers and engaging in your upstream. And Julie, you just mentioned a little bit about paying your suppliers to participate in that program. I want to turn back to you, see if there's anything else you want to share about incentives for upstream, and then we'll just kind of come down the line here.
Yeah, I'll actually mention both upstream and downstream, because again, we sort of, as a brand, we're in this unique kind of middle position of being somebody else's scope 3 and then having our own scope 3. So I mentioned financial incentives. I think sometimes they're obvious to us and we don't say it enough. We pay farmers to take the journey and to share the risk of the regenerative agriculture transition. Hopefully that goes without saying, but sometimes it doesn't go without saying, so I'm saying it. So yeah, that's risk sharing, that's data sharing, that's practice adoption. Some other incentives, obviously there's the market that we offer. This year, we've just started collaborating with our mill and a couple of other brands to also provide technical support. Obviously, farming in a regenerative way is different from the way that many farmers were trained, and so providing technical assistance providers is another element of how we incentivize, make sure that people want to work with us on this program. And then just because I have to. Downstream, I mean, obviously we're making these investments as a brand, and so it would be wonderful if our customers then recognize the effort that we're putting in and provide ways to, you know, showcase our work, highlight it. Obviously, joining Climate Action Partnership is one example of that. But like, we're doing the work. We're driving, you know, these products that contribute to societal net zero, and so we just think it would be great if more retailers and distributors kind of showcased and haloed the companies that are making these investments.
Yeah, so it's something we thought about a whole lot in the design of our program. So at first we had an incentive which was the achievement of a silver, a gold, and a bronze level program, climate program, but it was kind of complex to match that with elements of a climate program for suppliers. So we each achievement step, we have 6 in total, suppliers get a badge, and it has actually worked quite well for suppliers to use that in their communications with their counterparts at corporations, sharing that they have certain elements of their climate program in place. For instance, they complete a scope 1 and 2 footprint, they get the scope 1 and 2 badge, and then they can tell their category manager, look, we're participating actively in supplier locked. We've completed all our activities. We have a scope 1 and 2 footprint now. So it really helped to simplify part of the interaction between the category manager and the supplier. And then the whole program, we've kind of developed it as a incentive or an reward. So when suppliers enroll and get enrolled by companies, they get access to our learning platform. They get access to 5, it's not in person, but trainings led by people remote on each of the topics we cover. It includes the unlimited opportunity to ask questions by email. And we also introduced office hours, or we call it office hours, but it basically means when suppliers have questions, they can come to our meetings and ask questions. And last thing I will say about this, it's kind of funny how we developed this, because we, early on in the program, we gave the suppliers homework, but it was more like, look, this is the homework you could complete in order to develop your program. Well, then all of a sudden, at scale, we started getting back homework assignments for us to look at, and ultimately that led to kind of that badging system and all the criteria per topic. So that is just a little bit of thinking related to incentives from my side.
Thanks.
I mean, let me echo, what we've already heard, both on this panel, but even I would say in the first one with Luke, and I think Simple Mills representative. But I mean, before joining Unify, I was, working as a verifier of corporate climate claims, as a project developer for these insetting programs, and I would echo this need for, cost share. Most of the emissions reside within the farm gate if we're talking about the food system. And farmers, cannot, and I would say shouldn't be expected to fully bear that cost. That was very central to kind of the theory of change in that chapter of my career, where we were trying to, create a way for downstream entities to credibly claim, the reductions associated with the implementation of those practices, and then the funnel funds back to, to the farmer to help offset it. So, in my current capacity at Unify, I've helped to kind of direct some of our resources through corporate giving, the Unify Foundation, its grant making and impact investing, but to, in essence, help sponsor some of these joint supply chain projects. We had our impact report come out in January, and we speak a little bit in there to a project even with a Unify customer and a supplier where we were doing just that all the way up to the farm gate, helping to implement some of these practices. That being said, that's not our primary lever for providing incentives or achieving kind of our targets for Scope 3, if only because of the breadth of our network of suppliers, 10,000 of them, or the 250,000 SKUs that we distribute. So, we're thinking more expansively about incentives and very much through kind of that lens of how can we increase the value proposition of what it means to be a unified climate action partner. So, discussed the resources and some of the existing rewards earlier. But for us, we were very intentional about thinking, okay, well, what further value and support can we give to suppliers? So the partnership with How Good, as referenced, is one way in which we can begin activating that. But yeah, I'm really excited to, I think, be a partner in the ways Julie was describing too, where we have shared customers, and we're one step closer in some ways as a distributor. So how can we be not just an extension of your physical distribution network, but also help to tell your story and relay that information to the customers who care, including but not limited to that 20% who have corporate commitments, because Unify definitely has customers who are smaller independents, but who have aligned customers who themselves would be interested in knowing that within our assortment, some goods are lower carbon compared to others, and that's something that Unify is investing in our capabilities to provide, and therefore be a way to provide the incentive to the folks who are doing the work, creating that throughput, ideally helping to increase sales, market share, et cetera.
Yeah. I heard in each of your responses talking both about incentives to your upstream and then also the sharing of data between both upstream and yourself, and then downstream as well. So I want to talk a little bit about data, because I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of folks. And just a little bit of a time check, we're going to do Q&A in about 10 minutes. So just for my panelists to keep that in mind. So data collection, it's a really big challenge with Scope 3 engagement. And Ben, you just talked a little bit about that data collection using How Good. Could you talk a little bit more, and then we'll kind of gone down the line, how you're currently collecting data from suppliers, if there's anything else you want to say on that, and what strategies have you seen that have been most effective in that?
Sure. Well, I'll say to date, we've not used How Good yet to collect data, and the request to our suppliers for emissions-related data has been pretty limited. We disclose our emissions both in our impact report, but also with CDP as a third-party disclosure platform, and piloted an offering they had for the last few years to collect emissions-related data from a very small subset of our suppliers. So that's been our experience to date. I will say kind of, one thing that we were looking for relative to the strategy I've been describing was both an approach and a solution that went a bit further and provided, actionable sustainability insights and value both to ourselves and to suppliers that we would, be engaging around on data. So that very much informed kind of our assessment of the ecosystem of technology providers. To be sure, as I said, we landed with How Good based on the functions we were looking for, our product requirements. But I'll say there are a good number of viable solutions out there. Based on our assessment, they're all aligned with the greenhouse gas protocol from a corporate inventory standpoint. But even from the product carbon footprint level, saw many of them being able to allow for data transferability because they were all PACT compliant, or Partnership for Carbon Transparency. It was through that lens we were very much assessing these new solutions and what would work for us. And I think it's important in terms of securing supplier participation in that, there's going to be a diversity of tools out there, making sure that they're interoperable, that we can leverage. I mean, for instance, the work that you've already done in establishing an LCA and understanding of Oatly's carbon intensity, being able to ingest that into our tool of choice was something we definitely needed, because, yeah, we need to scale the participation across all of our suppliers, knowing some will be maybe doing this work themselves for the first time when engaging with us, and others are more advanced but wanting to leverage that work.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think those points are spot on. I think a lot of the time we invest is basically helping suppliers to start using certain tools. So we just established a pilot specifically for natural products and supply chain context with how good as well. And then where we come in as supplier locked is a lot of education on like, what is a life cycle assessment? What is a product carbon footprint? How do you build these up? And where do you find the right data for all the elements of your products? So I would say we're kind of technology agnostic. What I just mentioned relates more to the agricultural context, and then in other sectors we work with other data related companies. But really, for us, it's spending just a lot of time with the suppliers to step by step, not too fast, kind of talk about what the components are of the data. And that's relevant for developing the product footprint and also for developing their corporate footprint, also for establishing a target, also a lot of data, even forward-looking data needed. And then when they develop their abatement programs, there's a whole additional data need, like which energy audits have taken place, are there any insights in which technical measures within the organizational boundaries can be implemented. So I would say we spend a lot of time on the data topic, and for us the personal approach to that and also not going too fast has shown a lot of success.
That's great. Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I mentioned that we have data support partners for our agriculture program. They are collecting data for us at supply shed level. That's very important for us, both for the emissions factors that I mentioned, and also in at least one case, we're performing a sort of ROI analysis on the abatement potential of different practices so that we know how to tweak our program so that we're getting the most impact for the action. And then on the other side, on Oatly as a upstream for our suppliers, we have an in-house team that does product level climate footprints and comparative LCAs. I think we were the first national brand, I think, to have climate footprints for all of our products. And that we make that data available and enter into other, our suppliers' data systems when that's needed to help them calculate how we benefit their Scope 3.
That's great. Yeah, there's a huge amount of data involved in each of your jobs and your industries, and I think it's good to hear some examples of how you're managing it. Real quickly, maybe 1.5 minutes each. What's next for you in this work, and how do you see the Scope 3 landscape evolving in the next few years? So Vincent, maybe we'll start with you here.
Well, I think we have the basics in place for helping suppliers to develop their broader climate program, data processing, and for us next is going to be really implementation focused, both abatement, so meaning actual projects to bring emissions down, and we're working on launching an abatement hub where suppliers can find vendors to move their measures more towards implementation, and then also implementation on product embodied emissions, what we talked quite a bit about already. So I would say implementation.
That's great. Benjamin, how about you?
I would say for Unify, it's a very much a test and iterate approach to the strategy around, helping our suppliers differentiate based on their climate action. Just later this week, we're hosting a small summit with some of our key stakeholders where we're going to be talking further about this strategy, trying to validate it, ensure that it, is win-win, what needs to be true in order for it to, be so. But I'm excited to be doing that this upcoming year. We'll for sure continue kind of the same leveraging of our corporate giving, the foundation's work for other joint supply chain projects. I think for the landscape, I don't see the need for measurement or disclosing going away, whether it's voluntary or regulatory. But I'm hoping that momentum carries forward. I see a need for the industry to kind of evolve in the sense that we consider Scope 3 more than just an accounting exercise, though, and we use it as an actual tool to inform, okay, what does this look like in our other business functions, procurement or otherwise. It's going to be necessary for us to, from a business standpoint, go beyond it as just that. And I'd be remiss not to call out the the work that Oatly, for instance, and putting the carbon intensity on pack, like I would say there's a need for us to, start thinking about carbon, climate, decarbonization as an attribute. So whether that's a model to be replicated or just, inspiration to be drawn from, to scale Scope 3 action, like it needs to become more of the mainstream. So that's how I'm hoping the landscape will evolve.
Yeah, that's perfect. Cue it up for you, Julie, to close us out.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll say 3 quick things. On our turning our lens upstream, I think the next big piece of work is how to bring these regenerative agriculture programs to landscape scale through whole farm approaches. We heard that on the prior panel, shared supply sheds, and figuring out how different companies can work together to offtake the crops in the rotation and have a single system that farmers can participate in. I think that's a huge piece of work. Related to that, I think, is bringing nature and climate strategies for companies closer together so that it's one thing, because it is one thing. On the downstream, obviously I mentioned our partnership with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. We'll be going out trying to socialize that climate solutions framework as much as we can. Again, drawing attention to companies that are offering climate solutions and advocating that they have their place at the climate table and need to grow, need to be rewarded for the contribution they're making to net zero. And then, that involves the work that I alluded to, which is that as the category average of any sector decarbonizes over time, if you want to stay as a climate solution, you have to do your own work to maintain your 50% delta. And so we'll continue to do that in our own company, and then, put those climate labels on the packages and make sure people know, where we stand compared to competitors in the market.
Yeah, that's great. We have some time for questions. Great, the mic is up, so if you could just raise your hand, someone will come to you with the mic.
Hi there. So imagine yourself as at the product creation phase. So you're in the ideation step. You have a list of ingredients. You need to find a co-packer. You need to find a bottler. You need to find all of these steps. How do you go about choosing the ingredients, the suppliers, the packagers from that stage of we're just getting started, to make sure that you're able to keep this idea at the forefront of your company's ethos as you're moving forward?
It's a great question. Does one of you want to take that?
I'm raising my hand as though I have the most to say on it, and I don't. To be sure, Unify, we have some owned brands. Don't work on that team, but what you're saying does resonate though, because when I work with them on a number of topics, like, yes, you are working with a co-packer, and sometimes you are limited by the options available to them. But I've also learned from our Brands Plus team, it is opening the conversation for, I'm going to draw from like RSPO certified material. We have a corporate commitment to that end, and they worked with our existing partners to understand, okay, like, this is an ingredient we're interested in. Is it available today? If not, what would it look like to get there? So in that small way, it was, one brand working within the realities, as kind of you're describing as your set. But if you know what you want, that is the starting point to see what is available. And maybe they're hearing it for the first time, and you're helping them to understand that there's a new market opportunity and interest in, from an ingredient perspective, packaging or otherwise, that having a lower carbon option is of interest.
Julie, was there something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think that's a terrific question. I think, we picked oats for a reason, right? So one maybe piece of advice I would have is like choose an ingredient that is going to contribute to, a core ingredient that is going to contribute to the goals that you have. Our company founders picked oats because they knew it was a low carbon and nutritious option compared to other things that were in the milk space. And then I think this maybe goes without saying, but having supplier codes of conduct, supplier standards, making sure that your co-manufacturers and your suppliers can meet them. Not all of them can. And then having a strategic conversation about whether or not your co-man or your packaging provider or your ingredient supplier is willing to go on the journey with you and to have a shared set of perhaps climate or other sustainability goals. I think having those conversations in the beginning is a good move.
I have a question about your climate solutions framework. It sounds a little bit like what I've heard about Scope 4. How do you envisage that your customers downstream will account for the reductions? Will that be an inset or an offset, or how do you think that's going to work?
I'll do my best to answer the question. I do think it's important to say it's not our climate solutions framework. It is the Exponential Roadmap Initiative's climate solutions framework, which we have joined and have been certified by them as meeting the criteria. So I just want to make sure that that's clear in the room. Yeah, we've talked a lot about Scope 4, handprint, displaced, avoided emissions, however you want to call that. And I don't know that there's an answer yet. I think we're going to continue to publish the climate footprint of our products, but you're probably also going to be seeing us talk more and more about the role that we're going to have in societal net zero, and the ways in which kind of converting people from higher carbon alternatives to lower carbon alternatives creates a societal delta that also needs to be recognized. Exactly how we're going to do that, I don't know yet.
Yeah, and interesting that you bring it up. I think it's actually a topic that we see emerging a whole lot more again. I think avoided emissions or enabling effects of products was very popular maybe a decade ago, and especially in the last year I've heard a whole lot about it again. And I think you're onto something. Like if you can really establish the environmental benefits of your product for your customers, I think there can be a lot of value in that. And recently we've been looking a lot at what are customers most interested in. And sometimes if that would be emissions, or you just show them an emissions number, it can still raise a lot of questions. So I would say specifically related to this topic, the underlying drivers, like the energy that you have saved versus a baseline, or the fuel, or different practices that you've implemented. Like if that data within the calculations is very transparent, I think that might really resonate with customers.
I've got the microphone here, so I get to ask the next question. My name is Jonathan Kaplan. I'm with Effecterra. We're a sustainability consulting firm helping some of your suppliers do their carbon footprints and figure out their goals and action plans. One challenge we're having is that the bar has been set very high for documenting carbon sequestration. Regenerative farmers and ranchers provide a lot of value in terms of pulling carbon back down and getting it into the soil or into the trees. And yet the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the European Environmental Product Footprint Guidelines set a very high bar in terms of having direct data, statistical significance, ongoing monitoring, et cetera. How are you wrestling with that? What do we do here?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You're in some ways almost giving me PTSD from when I was on the technical working group for the land sector removal guidance draft, and that was 2 years ago, and we still have, last I heard, expecting the final to come out later this year, which is all to say, completely empathize with what you're laying out. Also acknowledge the core importance of removals as one of the ways in which the food and ag sector can help reduce our impact. But we're working towards submitting our own flag target later this year. We're seeing where the dust will settle, but right now, working with what is known, and for a number of those joint supply chain projects, for instance, there's plenty of work to be done in reductions in the short term. And I'll probably, allude to this. Well, I'll just say now, the importance to acting now is probably not lost on anybody in this room. So, yes, there's uncertainties from an accounting perspective around removals and the high bar that is set, but that can't stymie us from taking the actions we know need to happen regardless.
Either of you want to share anything? Okay. I think we've got time for one last question.
My question, I think, goes to Julie, big Oatly fan, me and my kids. It's our breakfast ritual. But you mentioned something I think that's really important, which is around you'd like consumers to better understand all the work that you're doing. How is Oatly going about that? Because there is a huge value action gap of people that say they want to align their dollars to their values, but so few brands out there are actually spending the money investing in to educate people about that. Are there ideas that Oatly is pursuing to help better inform them?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's this, you're pointing to something essential, which is that if, at the end of the day, if the end consumer does not understand the difference, then all the work that you have done is not having the impact in the world that you would like it to have, right? So, I mean, certainly our company is known for being a pretty loud voice in this space. And some of you might, for example, have caught a few years ago, we did these double billboards where we bought out space in major metropolitan areas and had like our climate footprint on one side and like an empty space where we were offering space for like the dairy equivalent to show their numbers too, so that consumers could compare those. So there's like cheeky ways of kind of raising that bar. But like more and more, we're also having the sort of, I don't want to say serious conversations, but we're also talking with our retail partners and our customers about what can they do in store, like in-store advertising, priority shelf placement, you know, we'd love an end cap, ways to showcase purpose-driven brands, regenerative brands, climate solutions brands. So I think it's going to have to be in partnership. You know, we're going to keep our voice loud, and then I think that's where the work that we're doing, you know, sort of along the chain to like reinforce and keep magnifying that message. I also know, of course, that like not every consumer buys on this basis, and so you also have to provide a great product right at the end of the day, which, as your family knows, we also do.
All right, we've got time for just some very quick closing remarks, maybe 20, 30 seconds from each of you. How would you like to wrap this up? And we'll start with Benjamin, and we'll go on down the line.
I mean, what I more or less said in the response to the question, but like, you know, we need to be doing the work of actually decarbonizing in addition to call it measurement or updating our abatement plans. You know, these aren't linear processes. They should be, you know, feeding back into each other. But yeah, just reiterate the importance of doing multiple things in tandem.
Doing the work, I love that. Thank you. Vincent.
Yeah, I think designing a program where you really think about your suppliers' needs, potentially a personal touch or a lot of personal interaction when possible are major elements of a successful Scope 3 program, and also very clear communications on what you would like for them to prioritize and work on with you.
Thanks. Julie?
Sort of what I was saying in reference to the last question. Find ways to reward companies that are doing this work. We're climate solutions or we're purpose-driven companies. Reward us, buy us. Ask your retailers to buy everybody who's in this space, because we're not just doing less bad in the world, we're doing more good.
Yeah, it's a great note to end on. Thank you very much. Really wonderful group of panelists today. I really appreciate your effort. Thank you.
This was fun.
So we are now going to take a lunch break. We'll start back up in this room at 11:45 for the afternoon programming. During the lunch break, you can visit the resource fair and art exhibit, which is open just next door in the Marquee Ballroom, Northeast Northwest. So make sure to stop over and check out our partner organizations. And we've got a great lineup of folks that are available and excited to chat with you. So thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.